What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Worship Guitar Show number 30. So glad to have you here. Bienvenidos a todos. That's about as much broken Spanish as I'm going to venture at the beginning, but just want to say thank you so much, everybody, for coming. Super excited about this show. Chris Rocha and Mike X Zuniga are two amazing.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Worship Guitar Show.
Aha. Well, we'll fix that little problem right there. So, just want to say, first of all, thank you so much for coming. Ladies and gentlemen, Worship Guitar Show number 30. Chris Rocha, one of my dearest friends, an amazing guitar player, has a heart for worship, ridiculous tone, is an equipper, is an inspiration, is a player, is a producer, is a content creator, and more importantly, he's just an awesome guy that's on fire for God. So he and I have had a chance to hang out at the NAMM show. I have not yet had a chance to play guitar with this guy, but I know that's going to come in the next year or less. Mike X Zuniga is kind of a touring cohort amongst other things of Chris's. They are obviously the guitar player and bass phenomenon that makes the Miel San Marcos tours come to life. They are just incredibly talented musicians. Mike has just got like that bass thing. And the good news is he actually started on guitar. So, he gets a little hall pass to be part of the Worship Guitar Show. So with that said, let me first of all bring Chris in, and then let me add Mike into the mix here. Hey, Mike, what's going on, man?
What's going on, guys?
Michael!
Well, gentlemen.
Man,
Mike, hey.
Thank you.
Great to meet you, man. Welcome aboard.
Thank you. It's an honor.
So where are you coming to us from? Because that I wish where I lived looked like that. I would be camping out on that floor there.
Dude, my studio is amazing.
The studio right now, so it's crazy. We had from 7 to 8 Central Time. My buddy Aldo, who's walking in. Let me show you guys for all the people that are here. This is Aldo Juarez. Incredible drummer.
What's going on, bro?
Chris and Aldo used to play together for many years. So Aldo was doing another live for Instituto Canción, which was like a global music worship music school. So it happened to work out that he needed the studio tonight. So I'm like, man, I've got something else going on, but you wrap up and I'll start with these guys and we'll get going. But it's just awesome because God has been opening so many doors to be able to share with people. So again, he's wrapping up, but now it's our turn. So we're just excited to be here. Thank you for having me. It's truly a pleasure.
This is going to be great. So first of all, let's do a little check in here. Look at this chat lining up. This is great. First of all, thank you everybody that's here. Really appreciate it. Great to see you. Do us a favor. Drop us a line here in the chat. Let us know where you're coming from. And, so we kind of know where we're going out to. And I have a feeling, the guys are going to probably, if we have enough Spanish-speaking people, they'll probably build a little bit of English and Spanish going on. But I will not embarrass myself with my broken Spanish too much, but I will venture to dig in. So first of all, you guys, how did you meet? And let me back up a step. Having a guitar player and a bass player that have toured together, worked together, and hung together, what you guys bring is, first of all, yes, there's all the musical expertise. There's all the stuff that goes into getting the gig. There's all the stuff that goes into keeping the gig. And then there's all the stuff that goes into being awesome at the gig. And then all the stuff that happens when there are other opportunities to grow out of that. Out of all of that stuff, there's such a wealth of information that you guys, I'm sure I know, we've gotten a chance, all of us, to talk a little bit, and I know how appreciative you are, but sometimes when you're in the act of doing stuff, we know how busy times are. You just get so busy in the doing, sometimes you kind of forget, it's like, oh, that thing. So Mike, I'm going to actually start with you, and then we're going to pull all this stuff together. So you actually, because I interviewed you a minute ago, and you were like, actually, the guitar was my first instrument. I really I was like, what? I got to put all these fingers down at the same time just to do one thing, man. Like, this ain't working for me. And so your pathway was to the bass. Your dad bought you your first setup.
Yep.
Chris, as I recall, the story is not dissimilar with you. Music is in your families. So
Yep.
let's hit Mike and then Chris. Let's talk about how music coming up in your families really helped guide your path to where you are today.
Definitely. So yeah, like I was saying, I was a guitar player all for about 5 minutes, and when I found out I had to use all my fingers, and there was so much to know with guitar, and then they said, but there's bass, and bass, all those fingers, you just need to use one finger. Obviously, now I know that there are much more complex things to play on bass, and I use a lot more fingers than just one finger. But back then, I was like one finger versus four fingers. I'm going to do the bass. So I was a guitar player for about 5 minutes. My dad uh, played bass when he was younger, and he taught me how to play. I think that my story is very similar to maybe many musicians that come up and grow up in church. I was asked to do that out of necessity. It wasn't so much that I had a passion for playing bass or music. It was literally my dad was the bass player. Then he gets called to be the pastor. He would play for worship and then preach. And then when the altar call would come up, there was no bass player. So he's like, you know what, son? I know you wanted to play guitar, but I can teach you how to play bass. So that's kind of where I came up. And from there, that's truly when the love of music came. And I will say this, like, I love the guitar. I love playing acoustic. I can play a little bit. Chris has been my teacher also for like a couple of sessions. He'll show me some crazy stuff that like blows my mind, and he gives me homework with about like 5 minutes of stuff to work on. It takes me like a month to work it out. So I love that expression of musicality on the guitar, but there's just something for me, obviously being a bass player, that I just love about the bass. Obviously, the role that the bass plays in the band. I definitely consider myself a groove player, a foundation player. So coming in church, growing up in church, I think that really showed me my place and my role in the worship team, and music in general. I didn't have to like overplay, and I didn't have to worry too much. I just had to hold it down, as they say. So that's kind of what the road that has kind of been love it. I mean, I love it. I wouldn't change it for the world. And yeah, I wish I could play guitar like Chris Rocha, though. I will say that. I hear Chris play, and I'm like, I wish that I could sound like that. But I will settle for second best on bass guitar. Yeah, I'll end with that.
That's hilarious.
I love it. So, are you primarily a 4-string or a 5-string guy? Are you kind of creeping up on us there, but from the other end there?
So I started on a 4, and then I went to a 5. Right now I have an Aleva Capolo jazz, or Aleva Capolo LG5 Classic Supreme, which is basically a 60s jazz inspiration bass. That's a 5. And then I have a 77P bass. That's a 4. So what I'll do kind of when I start to feel the need, I will force myself to put the 5 away and force myself to play things on the 4-string, because it makes me calibrate my grooves, my patterns, things that I would use the 5th string. Now I have to do different positions. So I just like to change it up, but I think my main player is my 5-string.
I love that. We're going to come back to that kind of reharmonizing on the 4-string, because I am a closet bass player. Chris, you play bass too, right?
Yeah, I love playing bass.
Because bass is that center point between the harmonic structure and rhythmic structure. It's the left-handed piano, but that ability to totally take a chord and hang out at the 3, and is it an inversion, or is it sitting at the 3 of the chord? So we've moved where the harmonic structure is and all of that stuff, and then kind of like, all right, am I going to hang out with the kick drum? So before we get too geeky, because we're going to go there, one of the things that I want to do is that, first of all, it's really easy for you guys to hang out up here. And I know you guys are great teachers, but it's easy to go, oh, yeah, man, we were throwing out the 16th note thing, man. And we were doing this, and we were hitting the 4/16 of all these things. They were bringing it around, and every time we did on the first, downbeat to 1, and then we brought it to the 16th. But I really want to make sure that anybody that's here that's at any level, we can kind of throw a bunch of that expertise towards them. So that said, Chris, my pal, my man, So
Yes, sir.
we're going to bring you up solo like here, and you're going to tell us about your coming up on the guitar.
Well, I think it's we all of a lot of us that grew up in church have very similar stories. I My dad was not saved, but he was a musician. So when he got saved, I was about 7 years old, and he started teaching me the guitar, the acoustic guitar. He knew, how to get by with a few chords. So he started teaching me, and I all of a sudden became obsessed. I was 7 years old at this time. I just became obsessed with the guitar. I remember sitting in the front row, watching the guitar players, and I would go home and try to play what they were playing, and it just became like an obsession for me. I was just fell in love with this instrument, and my dad, he started a band with my whole family. My sisters they would play keyboard, they would sing. My dad played. I played guitar. My brother actually at the time had a little drum machine that he would like program and stuff. So we started doing like little tours around Texas. We went around to the Valley, San Antonio, Austin, and I kind of got used to that whole being in a band. I remember being in the house, and my cousins and stuff were playing outside because I'm in a neighborhood where we're a bunch of family. Our next door neighbors are all family. So I remember seeing them play basketball. I'm like, I want to go play. And my dad was like, no, you need to stay inside and practice. So, I'm grateful for that now, that he was pretty stickler with that. But yeah, we would travel, we would play, and the rest of my family, my sisters, they grew up in life and all that. But I stuck with music, and when I became a teenager, I would start a little band with my neighborhood kids. I would like teach them a little bit to play, and we would start playing. The cool thing was that my dad had like drums, bass, keys, everything at the house. So literally my front door, you would open up the front door, and the first thing that you saw was a double bass drum set. It was like this 80s kind of bass drum, 80s drum set. And I started learning to play drums. I started learning to play keys, bass, and that was really, really helpful that I was able to be around all these instruments my whole life, basically. So it was like I would play at church, and one week, the bass didn't come, they would put me on bass. The week after, if the drummer didn't show up, there I am playing drums, or running sound, whatever they needed. But I was kind of raised in that whole environment to be a part of church. And my mom, I remember my mom, it'd be like Wednesday nights, and I'd sneak out to the back, start playing with my friends and my cousins and stuff. And the sun started going down, and I remember saying, man, I hope my mom forgets about church tonight. I hope she just lets me play with my friends outside. But nope, there she is, opening doors, screaming my name all over the neighborhood. So I was like, oh crap. And then my friends were like, hey bro, your mom's calling you, time to go to church. So she never let me miss a service. So it was great to have that like culture, instilled in me to like always be at church, always be helping out. I remember being 18 years old, 17, 18 years old, and I was helping out like 3 or 4 different churches in a week. I would go help out a youth group, or so I kind of fell in love with just being a part of church, playing at church, making a difference. So yeah, that's kind of my whole thing. Stuck to it, and I do it now. I love it. I can't complain.
I love that. So, it's interesting. The culture that we come from, in so many ways, influences not only what we do, but how we view it.
Yep.
So, I want to take a moment and talk about how you separate, because a big part of what I want to be able to do is have the people that are here tonight benefit from your professional expertise. Because you guys have this amazing ability to be planted in the house, be contributors in the house. Like, I know one of you guys, your church got broken into, and you were down at a church at 6 a.m. replacing some glass, right? This is like that. We're lifers.
Yeah.
So it's a very interesting balance of being a lifer in the church, but also finding how to step out and have a career in that. So, I'd love it if you guys could take a moment and talk about how you view being servants of God in the house in a church environment, and how that translates into having a career as a Christian musician, not necessarily just a worship musician, but a Christian musician, and how that guides the decisions of who you play with, And sometimes, even if you're playing with people that aren't believers, how that impacts what it is that you're thinking and how you're behaving. So you make sure your guard is up when it needs to be up. And it's also so you can be a light outside the four walls. And also, if you just kind of go, there's other people that can do that. I just want to play with people that are believers because you know what? There's somebody else that was God has for that gig. I would love to hear your guys' take on that because I think there's a lot that can come into that. And I'd love to hear you guys riff on that. That would be fantabulous.
All right, I guess I'll go first. My personal story, you every musician when they take it real serious has to hit that point, of like, okay, how am I? Obviously, nobody wants to be poor. Everybody wants to be able to have a family, to give your wife what she wants, to get a house. All this, you want to be able to live like a comfortable lifestyle, right? So it's like, okay, music is my main thing, right? I knew when I remember being a senior in high school, and then you had these college recruiters come in and they hand out all these papers. And I remember looking at like 3 sheets of paper, looking at 200 different job titles, right? I'm scrolling through lawyers, whatever, all kinds of stuff, dentists. And I remember seeing every single one of those. And I remember getting to the very end and I'm like, man, I don't want to do any of this stuff. Like if I tried any one of these jobs, I'm going to totally fail. I said at that time I knew I was like, the only thing that I want to do is music. That's all I want to do. So it was like, I knew that that's the only shot I had of becoming successful was to just stick with my music, because I know the type of personality that I have. If I'm not passionate about something, I'm probably not going to be great at it. So, I remember having one-on-one time with God when it was kind of like at that point where like I had to make life decisions. I was like 18 or 19 years old, um, and other professions, let's say lawyers, all these other guys I'm talking about, dentists, carpenters, they don't have to choose whether they're a Christian lawyer or whether they're a secular lawyer. It's just a lawyer. But us musicians, we have to make that call of like, okay, am I going to be out there in the bars, or am I going to be out there touring with whatever, or am I going to be at church? So it's kind of like we hit this brick wall when it comes to like getting serious with our craft and be like, man, I gotta figure out what to do. Well, I hit this brick wall, right? And I had this opportunity. Since I'm from Corpus, I was connected. One of my friends was a first cousin of Selena Quintanilla. Selena is one of the biggest singers to ever come out of Corpus Christi. Obviously, it's a tragedy. They killed her and all that. Well, her dad, Abraham, is like the manager of the whole organization. They got this amazing studio. And my friend Manuel was like, hey, man, I talked to them all about you, and, they're all about it. They heard you, everything. So Abraham Quintanilla calls me up and he's like, hey, Chris, I got a few different artists that I'm signed, that I signed them up. We're gonna tour them out. I want you to tour with them, and I want you to work in my studio, which at the time was the best studio in all of Corpus. It's beautiful. I don't know how many millions of dollars this studio is, but it's amazing. So here you are with this opportunity to tour with Abraham Quintanilla and his record label and work in his recording studio. At the same time, I had this church in Beaumont, Texas, also take interest in me to be part of the staff there. So here I am with these two decisions, and I'm like, oh, wow, what am I going to do now? So I started praying. I'm like, God, like, what do you have in front of me? What am I supposed to do? And I hear what he told me was pretty clear. He said, Chris, as long as you stay close to me and my church, you'll always have what you need. You'll never be missing nothing. You're always going to have what you need. Stay close to me, stay close to my church, and I'll take care of everything. And up to that point, man, up to now, I made the decision to go to Beaumont. I went out there, got involved in staff there at Beaumont, and I truly believe that God has been taking care of me. He's given me favor. I've had so many opportunities. I'm in here in this cool show with you guys. Worship Musician Magazine to me is just to be a part of you guys, to be writing for you all, and to be here in this cool little, live stream we have going on. So I made the right call. Obviously, I feel like I made the right call. So that's my whole story. Mike, how do you feel about all this stuff?
Man, well, I definitely can relate to a lot of that. When I started, it's funny that you were saying that you were going through the list, and you're like, man, no, that's not for me. That's not for me. That's almost identically my story. Basically, my dad came to me and he's like, son, it's time. You need to start thinking about what you're going to go to college for. What are you going to do? What do you like? And he was like, maybe you could be an architect, maybe you could be a doctor or a lawyer, all these great things. I was already doing music, and he came from doing music before he came to know Christ. Before he obviously was pastoring, he was playing in the bars, playing in the nightclubs, and he knew that lifestyle. So I think that for him, anything that was music related almost seemed like that would be the direction that it would go to. And obviously that was a concern for him. And so he's like, you should do something else. And I said, man, Dad, I love music. Like, that's what I want to do. I told him I dreamed like one day of having a studio, and I would just share with him these dreams. And he's like, and he was brutally honest with me. He said, you know what, son? He's like, I understand that. He said, but I know I came from there. He said, you're going to starve to death. The typical starving musician quote. And I said, man, I'd rather starve to death doing what I love than live every day in and out doing something I hate. And he said, okay, I respect that. He said, the only piece of advice I'm going to give you, and that's the only thing he told me, he said, you have to be the very best that you can be. He wasn't telling me to be the very best bass player in the world. He was saying, in everything that you do it with excellence. Obviously, coming from a pastoral home, coming from a home of faith, a home of principles and core values, he, instilled these things in me. And obviously, he didn't want me going astray and maybe doing the things that he had been involved in as far as musically, secularly. But he said, you know what? You just have to, be the very best that you can be. So I took that and I ran with that. And I've always said this, people would ask me, hey, if so-and-so called you, would you play with them? And I said, man, I don't know. I think that I would really have to think about the whole entire perspective, the context of it. I said, but there are many things that now that I've placed in my life, like kind of standards. So I had one time a buddy of mine, I worked at Guitar Center, and he said, hey man, I know you're starting up your recording studio. Man, I want to bring my band in and I want to record. And I remember him well, and he was a crazy guy, not a believer. He was a crazy guy. And I go,
Oh,
man,
can we come
I
hang
don't,
out at your studio?
yeah,
And do you have a fridge? Because we're bringing a keg. The fridge has got to
really.
be big enough for a keg.
Really, and I mean, I don't know if I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but I'm going to tell you exactly the way the conversation went. So he said, "Dude, I think that I go, dude, I'm not going to beat around the bush." I said, "You guys are a little rough around the edges, man." I said, "My studio's at my church. Like, no. Like, I'll make sure the guys are, on their best behavior." And I said, "But what about the music? Oh man, oh, you're gonna love it." I said, well, name me one song. What's one song, that you guys are wanting to record? He's like, oh, I know exactly the song. He goes, dude, the bass line on it, you're gonna love it, man. You're gonna love it. I go, okay, cool. What's the name of the song? And he goes, the song is called Necrophiliac. And I'm like, bro, do you know what that means? I think it's and I'm like, and for those of you that don't know, or those of you that do know, we don't have to teach you that here on this live tonight. But I'm like, bro, no, there is no way you are coming to the studio. And I said, I love you as a brother, I love you as a friend. But that's when I knew, and I found out very early on, that I had to set standards and I had to draw the line in the sand somewhere, because if not, I would get involved with things. And now looking back, I know that God honors those decisions. Many of us don't want to be in the starving musician place. We want to work. Hey, that's money, that, it's income. Hey, I think I should do it. I think God really honors, and I know that he honors our hard decisions, but the decisions that honor him. And I'm not saying that the people that play secularly are dishonoring God. I think you said it earlier. I think that each of us have a calling. Each of us have a role that we're supposed to play in God's, plan for our lives. If God wanted me to be one of those guys playing with a secular band, then I think that by this point he would have opened that path and led me down that path. But as far as being rooted in church and being someone that serves in the house and also outside, I think it's very important to have very deep roots in church. I think some of the friends that I've had, that I still have, that have gone and lived through some really hard times, have been because they have been down left and right and have kind of let go of having their roots planted in the church. I think that it's great to be out there. It's great to be doing all the amazing things that we get to do. But sometimes it's also, you give. You said it earlier, we don't even realize it. I mean, we're running on empty. And when we're running on empty, we start making poor decisions. And I have had friends that have found themselves in places wondering, how did I get here? And a lot of it had to do with, they had lost the basic principles of why they were doing what they were doing, remembering who has given us this opportunity, the talent, the space to do it. And I think that, like I said earlier, there is just so much honor that God gives back to us when we can make hard decisions and say, hey, if I have peace about it, then I'm going to keep walking. And if I don't have peace about it, I'm going to stop right here. And it's just been awesome. It's been awesome to see, like, with Chris, I've gotten to do so many things with Chris. Like, we got to do Madison Square Garden with Miel San Marcos. So many cool things that we've gotten to do that I know for a fact, had I made different decisions earlier on, had I made decisions maybe based on what I wanted to do, not so much what I felt God was telling me to do, I don't think that I would be where I am today. So I'm very grateful for God's guidance. And even in the moments, I'm not perfect. I've made mistakes. I've made bad choices. But then again, that's when grace and mercy comes in. And again, I'm just grateful to be, like Chris said, doing what we do here and now is kind of a mind-blowing thing. I don't think I ever expected for God to do what he's done in our lives.
Gotta love that. There's so much. My wife is like my best coach, and she's always like, take threads and then ask more questions about threads. But you gave me like a whole carpet. I'm like, well, we could go here. So I made some notes that we're going to have to come back to. First of all, let me just take a moment. And unfortunately, everybody that's on Facebook, I can't do this. My apologies because of the way it works. But we got Ricardo, we got JD, we got Alan. Nice. Oh, that's me. We got Jose. Hey, wait, I know that guy. And Alan again. What's going on, Chris? Sounds of Worship. What's happening? All right. And if I hit repeats, I apologize for that. Look at that cool photo. I love that. Oh, come on.
Bro, you can show me how to do that, man. That's super cool.
Isn't that awesome? Like, and the amazing thing, that's probably like a church, right? So it's like, that's awesome. Hello. Awesome. Florida, Georgia, Drizzly, Alabama, North Carolina, Puyallup, Washington, Venezuela. Oh, come on.
Wow.
I think that's the longest commute to this church this evening. Welcome. The years of playing creates trust. Allentown. Hola, Romeo. ¿Cómo está? All right. Also, it comes out tomorrow. We've got an interview with Mike in the new issue of Worship Musician Magazine, but also, you guys are also both in Músicos Adoradores, our brand new Spanish-only magazine to serve the Spanish-speaking house of worship. I got my hands all up in that stuff because we were so excited knowing how hungry for God and for music and for training from guys like you, the Spanish-speaking house of worship is. So we are so excited. Liz Rocha, that last name sounds very familiar. Is there any relationship there?
That's Chris's CEO. That's Chris's CEO.
That's my boss right there.
I got the chairwoman of the board upstairs.
Yeah.
I know exactly how it is. All right. We're just going to go there. Analog tube versus modeling. So that gets me to a great setup, Romeo. So Mr. Rocha, he goes with the pod. He hangs with the helix. But he does the twos with the notes. So I've been noticing, like, what he may not know, but I'm like, I watch all his guitars and all, it's like, oh, there's another Gretsch. Because, like, at first they're like, oh, there's the blue one. I'm like, wait a second. Now there's a green one. Wait a second. Now there's a silver one. Like, dude, you're like a guitar factory, except in reverse, like the guitarists come to you, right? The guitar factories send them out, but you're like, come to me, Silver Gretsch. So,
That
but I also noticed I've been seeing you with the two rocks. So, would you care to, as you talk about analog versus tube versus monitors, I would love to know how you got hooked up with two rock and how you blend the analog and the digital together, my friend.
All right. So I think if anybody knows me, Mike probably knows me better than anybody else. And Mike knows that way back in the day, I was like gung ho, tube amps all the way, and pedals, analog pedals. I was never into the whole, multi effects pedals. I was always all about keeping everything analog. But I hit a brick wall. I hit a brick wall when I started touring with Miel San Marcos, because these guys, when they tour, they don't play games, man. You're basically gone most of the year, so I had built up my production business where I was still producing, still doing great things in the studio, and I wanted to tour with Mio San Marcos, and I wanted to produce. So it was like, okay, I have to figure out a way to travel and to keep producing, keep recording guitars in hotels in other countries, and maintain my productions, because I don't want to let that fall, and I want to be able to tour with this awesome band that I also had the privilege to produce for them. So I was forced to find other ways to kind of develop my tone. So I reached out and got a Helix, and my first rig was a Line 6 Helix with like three or four analog pedals. I think I had I don't know, I had this one, I had a couple different drives, my hot kick, which is my main lead tone distortion pedal, and like a Big Sky, right? Integrated with this whole Helix. It's really cool how you can integrate both worlds, the digital and the analog. So I was able to kind of come up with something pretty cool. And I was like, at first, when I started recording these projects, I was kind of like, crossing my fingers. When I would send them back out to clients, I'd be like, man, I hope they don't say anything about my guitar tones. I think they sound great, but it's not my like tube gear that I'm used to using. I'm a huge fan of Dr. Z. I heard you say Two Rock. Two Rock, the company that's been doing the music videos for Mel San Marcos, they provide the backline. So the guitar player there brings this Two Rock amp, which I'm a big fan of Two Rock. I think they are amazing. But the amp that I was like gung ho about is my Maz 38. I love Dr. Z. I love everything that they do. So if you're gonna pull out an amp for me, a tube amp, I would probably say Dr. Z. But yeah, I got into this whole like hybrid, half digital, half analog world. And I started I started realizing that there's tons of other guitar players out there that can't afford a $4,000 pedal board with a $2,500 tube setup. So I started like buying these little multi effects pedals, like the HT500, the Firehawk, also with the Helix and the GT100, and I started putting out my presets with the tones that I would get out of these multi effects pedals. It's actually become a really good business for me. But basically, spending time with these effects pedals and tweaking them out to get great tones out of them. So, I've actually gotten really used to my hybrid setup, and that's kind of what I use now. Obviously, I'm always going to be a fan of tube amps, always going to be a fan of analog pedals, but that's kind of where I'm at, man. I was kind of forced to find new solutions and maintain like the integrity of my tone with all these different. And the good thing is we live in a day and age where there's so many options, man. Now I have an actual analog amp pedal on my pedal board where I have a preamp that's like an actual little tube amp. So there's so many different ways to find great ways to get a good tone.
I love that. I'm going to jump in with a bass question here, but I think Mike and I are going to have the same answer because I think you when we did that interview thing, you kind of said that. So this is coming in from Facebook. Good evening. The question is for Mike. What brand of cheap electronic bass do you recommend? So that's going to set you up, and I just want to jump in after that if you're good with that. So Mike, go ahead and rock us on a great cheap electric bass. I know where we're going with this.
Yeah, you do. So, I mean, I think that there are, okay, you use the word great, and then you use the word cheap, and then you use the word bass. Those are kind of, to me, I mean, obviously bass, but great and cheap, it's kind of a hard thing to really find. I mean, it's you either got a great bass or you got to cheat bass sometimes. At least that's what we think. What I did, and where you're going with this, is I did a video, a tutorial where I took Squire Affinity. I think I found it online. It was a piece, but I found it online. I was like, how much does this cost? I literally could have gone online and bought it at a Walmart, and they would have shipped it to me like in a couple of days for like $220. Okay, compared to my bass that like Jimmy Capolo from Eleva Capolo. If you were to buy that bass brand new, I think it's like $7,500, $8,000 right now. So, very,
Holy
very,
cow.
yeah, very big difference. So my whole thing in this tutorial for this conference was, you can do a lot with a little. That was the translation of my title. So I took this Affinity, I plugged it into Studio One, and I started tweaking it, and I started recreating even some of the effects that I have on a small little pedal board that I use. And basically, at the end of the whole thing, I did a tutorial. I mean, a cover, and I used the Squire Affinity, and that thing sounded like $1,000,000. I mean, I squeezed the life out of it. I will say that. I got every single ounce that it had to give. I got out of that bass. But you know, I would I recommend you to go get a Squire Affinity? No, probably not. If I had to recommend a great cheap bass, again, relative to what we consider cheap, I've had great experiences with Sire basses. I have a lot of friends that own the Marcus Miller Sire bass. I think they're like 500. I think there's like two or three. I don't know if it's like 400, 700, and maybe a little more, under 1,000. But all of those really have just been great. If I had to recommend one, if you want to go like crazy and you want to shock people, you could squeeze some good stuff out of that Squire Affinity. But if you just want to get a good bass that's not going to break the bank, I think my suggestion would be that Sire bass. And if you just want to spend all of your savings, then go buy that Eleva Capolo. They're all going to sound great. You just got to know how to get the sound out that you're looking for.
Let's see, $7,500 or a Squire. You know,
Or
so
you
the
could be like Chris Rocha,
yeah,
and just get them to send all the guitars.
he's the
Yeah,
warehouse.
yeah.
So you know, the interesting thing is that you know, Chris and I have gotten to know the folks at Gretsch and Fender, and you know, they're the same company, but they're separate brands within the same FMIC, Fender Musical Instrument Corporation. But so they're sending stuff to me to review, not the plethora of Gretches that Chris receives, but I am grateful. So that they said I specifically requested a Squire Jazz P, and it's a sub $300 bass. It's a phenomenal bass. I mean, it's just kind of like because I'm sorry for those of you who aren't. So let's just talk. You saw Mike at Madison Square Garden. You're like, I want to do that. So generally speaking, the two most popular basses are some inspiration from a jazz bass,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of two offset pickups, or I should say two separate pickups that you can toggle between, or a P bass, which has kind of got these slightly offset
Yeah,
one pickup that's basically you kind of got a volume and a tone, and that's what you got.
that's
But
right.
but they're amazing. So a jazz P blends those together, and it gives you the ability to kind of have the best of those two basses. And the good news is that actually instead of like sometimes when you combine things, you get the worst of all the things come out. But a jazz P is almost always the great blend of all the things you want. So you can do the neck and the bridge pickup and just have lots of options. So
Yep.
there was another question that came through here about custom instruments, and given the $7,500 bass question, let me find the one that was asked about the custom luthiers, or I'll just paraphrase it because it may have disappeared up into the thread here. But basically, I kind of know the answer to this, but um, Mike, are the basses custom made for you around a certain model, or do you just kind of go, "Hey, this is what I want"? And Chris, how much of the stuff that you have, because I know every so often there's other guitars that make it into your collection, how much of the stuff you guys play has been custom made? Either somebody brought it to you because they knew what you liked and made it for you, and or you said, "Hey, this is really what I want. Can you go build this?"
As far as for me, I got my hands on this jazz bass, this Leva Coppola, I think back in 2011. I had a friend that was like, "Have you heard of a Leva Coppola?" I said, "Man, I've never heard of them before." He said, "Well, if you get your hands on one, you're going to fall in love with their jazz version. The P bass is great as well, but he goes, the jazz version, you're going to love it." I said, "Okay." So I start looking them up, and I'm just like flabbergasted at how expensive these basses were. And I had actually, I'll give you the very short version. Was given a Fodera Emperor bass, which is crazy because that is like a once in a lifetime type of thing. Yeah,
And I was
exactly.
there when it happened. I was right there when it happened.
Yeah, right,
Here's
right.
a $10,000 base. It's yours. You're
You
like
know what?
Chris is like,
I'm like, I could play a little bit of bass too. You got something for me?
oh,
Like,
I love this.
oh my
Yeah.
Oh,
gosh.
you
So
guys.
he gave me this bass, and I said, "Wow, I mean, you got to be joking. Like, I'm getting punked right now. There's got to be a camera. Like, where's the camera?" And he goes, "No, like, you like it. If you like it, you can take it." And I said, "Wow, thank you." So I took it home. I had it for about 2 years, and it just never it never worked in the context. I mean, at that time we were playing with an artist named Koalo Zamorano. Chris was there. It was more rockin'. So it was a little too refined for that sound. And then I took it to Lakewood when I was at Lakewood, and it didn't really fit in there. So I just had this super expensive bass at home. And my friend was like, "Have you heard of this company, Leva Coppola?" I said, "No." He goes, "Dude, if you find a jazz bass, like, you need to just jump on it." I said, "Okay." So I went on talkbass.com and I said,
Was
"I've
that
got this
Abraham that
bass."
told you that?
Yes, yes, it was. So I went on Talkbase, and then I put, "I've got this bass," spec'd it out, put the pictures up, and I said, "I'm looking for this bass, this model, this color, the whole thing." And about a month goes by, and a guy reaches out to me, and he says, "I've got the bass that you're looking for exactly to the T, and I want to trade bass for bass." So not only was I given one free, but I traded the one free, amazingly expensive bass for another amazingly expensive bass. But the thing is that Jimmy is building these jazz and P bass inspired, like Fender inspired instruments, and I just can honestly say that he has nailed the sound. Basically, when I first asked him, "Well, how does it sound?" He said, "Old." I'm like, "What does that mean? Old." Now I understood. He is recreating a vintage sounding, that one bass that everyone is searching after. You see a 65 P bass and you go, "That thing must sound like heaven." Little do you know that the electronics are shot, everything is just busted up, but because it's a 65, you think that it has to sound great. Um, he's recreating that in new instruments. So it wasn't custom made for me, but man, I was immediately drawn to it, and it's just become my sound. It just sounds amazing. I don't really have to do anything. So I haven't had anything specifically done for me, but I do think that definitely defines the sound that I always kind of envisioned in my mind.
As far as me, I don't really do a lot of custom stuff because I really like being a team player with companies like Gretsch. Like whenever I request my guitar, like for this year, the first thing I tell Mike is like, "Hey man, so what are you guys focusing on a particular model that you want to promote?" Because what I want to do is I want to go on stage playing something that people can purchase. I know
Mm-hmm.
I am well aware of how the marketing industry works, and how some of these sponsorships work. Like I want to be that guy that's going to think about companies, that's going to think about, because I know with these guitars they sound amazing. I know I'm going to be able to get great tones coming out of them. So I would like to incorporate something like if somebody sees me playing something, they want to have my particular sound. They want to be able to, they can hop on Sweetwater or Guitar Center and probably, purchase the same thing themselves. So I do have a couple guitars that I had made for me that I love. I love them. I love them a whole lot. But the ones that I'm currently using now are the Gretsch models. A lot of them are the Japanese models: the Falcon, the Penguin, the Sparkle Jet, the Dual Jet, Broadcaster Junior. They're all guitars that you can buy directly from Gretsch, and they sound great. So yeah, it's one of those things. I think it'd be nice to have, a real nice custom shop, master built guitar. I haven't gotten to that point yet where I want it that bad, but that's kind of where I'm at. I do, when it comes to acoustics though, I do have a nice McPherson back there that is ridiculous. So that's not really one you could just go and purchase off Sweetwater. But when it comes to my electric guitars, I typically like to do, something that you can grab right away.
I love it. So it's funny, Mike. You were talking about so this it's not an original, but it's basically the American original '60s P bass, and it
Wow.
came here. Oh yeah, I mean, like if you were to buy an instrument purely on looks, which is the worst reason to buy an instrument ever, but like so I remember like so part of my gig is I review instruments so people who follow you guys can go, hey, what's good, what's not, right? Because one of the interesting things about the time we live in is you order an instrument that you've never played. Like when we were coming up, you wouldn't buy something you hadn't played. I mean, like who in their right mind would buy an instrument that they never played? I mean, how do you know if you're going to like it? Just like so. But I saw this color, and so basically the whole vibe. And the funny thing is, the moral of the story is, everybody's trying to make a vintage Fender bass. Yep. It's the funniest thing. It's just like, wait a second. I thought we're all this guitar technology is moving forward, but in the bass world, is like we want to get as James Jamerson as we possibly can get. Like, just take me back to the '60s, and I'm cool. So it's a funny thing that happens with that. So all right, so let's take a look here. Let me just make sure I haven't missed any great questions. So all right, let's talk about. Traditionally, when you think about building the groove, as a bass player, I'm thinking about where's the kick drum, where's the click, where's the snare drum leaning, what's happening with the hi-hat, what's happening with that second eighth note. Is it straight up? Is it being pulled a little bit? Is it being pulled or is it being swung? As a guitar player, I'm just listening to me. No. As a guitar player, I'm listening to the drums. So, but at the same time, that's different than when you actually like, Mike, did you play bass on Increíble?
That's you, right?
Well, there's several versions. I know I did, and I always think of the videos. I think I did I don't know if I did I do the live? I know I think I did the studio one where you guys are with Evan.
Because you did Como en el Cielo, you did the whole record. I sent it to you.
No. Como en el Cielo, no. I did Proezas, the first one that you did with them.
That's
right. He didn't make the second record. Sorry, Mike.
I did not.
No, I didn't have that much authority at that time to actually. Yeah, I remember they did their own thing with that one. But then after that, Pentecostés, you did that one.
I hope I know you.
Or Como en el Cielo as well.
Yeah, because I did Proezas, which was the live one that I overdubbed everything in the studio, and then you guys did Como en el Cielo, but then you guys did that like studio, the studio cuts.
Yeah.
I did all of those.
Okay, so the video you're talking about, Doug, we're like all outside jumping around and stuff. That's Mike. Mike's on the bass there. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So like, the thing about that track is like Chris's guitar, I think it's panned all the way to the left, but it's all it's got all this bounce, but it's like this far from the click. It's like, for those of you who play guitar, he basically did the impossible. He said, all right, like we a minute ago, and I'm going to jump into a mini music lesson because we alluded to it. And I always like to make sure we take everybody along with us. So basically, if you were to take a quarter note and split it into three parts, you end up with 3 eighth note triplets: 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 3, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3. If you eliminate the middle triple, you end up with 1, 3, 2, 3, 3, 3, 4, 3, which are dum ba dum ba dum ba doo doo dum ba, which is where the blues comes from, or amongst other things. But the point being is that basically, if you were to take traditional eighth notes, and you were to take that, in other words, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and you start pulling that second eighth note towards a dum 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 or it just starts to get this little bit of swing. And so what Chris is doing is this groove is a huge groove, but he's adding like millimeters of swing, and it's perfectly in time. I'm just like, I remember listening to that going, it's like he's swinging it's like Imagine you like you got swag. You ate too much at dinner. You're coming back to the car, but he's swaggering like this, and it is so perfect. So normally we would be paying most attention to the drums, but there are times where, because the bass player is playing this harmonic counterpoint, it's not just the drums that you're listening to. You've got to actually go. Chris, this is not directed towards you. It's like, well, how far out of time is the guitar player actually? And I got to now split that difference, or else it sounds out of time. Even in the studio, this happens all the time, where you kind of go, all right, well, this is where the time is, and this is where this guy is. Much of the time, as a bass player, at least, I have a tendency to go, I have to hit my downs with the drums, and I have to hit the out of time stuff with the guitar player, but splitting that difference. So I'm kind of holding that pocket together. As a guitar player, we do spend time listening to the drummer, but there's times when you're playing that funky, you got to be listening to the bass player. So long story short, I would love your guys' insights on how, as a bass player, you groove with a guitar player, and what you're listening for, and as a guitar player, how you groove with a bass player and what you're listening for.
I think that's a really cool actual point. So I remember Chris, when I started playing pedals, with pedals, Chris was like, before I started, I should say, Chris said, "Hey man, have you ever thought about playing with pedals?" And I go, "No, not really." I said, "I don't need pedals. I'm a bass player." And he goes, "No, man, you can play with pedals. Of course you can." He goes, "The thing is that I'm like rocking out, there's all this drive, and when I go up to do the solos, like all that power is just gone, you know." And he's like, "Have you ever thought about, finding, an overdrive?" So he got me into this expansion of my sound and mind as far as pedals. But I started actually paying attention to what he was doing, because even though I'm playing bass, there's a lot of linear stuff that obviously I can play and continue, not only sonically, but also rhythmically, so that when he goes up to do the solos, I can still keep that drive and still keep maybe some of the figures that he was doing. So it's been really cool to hear like what Chris does. I mean, I'll send Chris a track, and it can have the most basic groove and the basic bass track, and this dude sends me back like layers upon layers of guitars, and he has totally transformed this song. And then I'm gonna be honest, there have been times, I've never told you this, Chris, and maybe the people that we record for, they don't know this, but after you record your guitars, there have been times I will scrub my original bass track
Really?
and I will go back and record the bass again, because there was something that you did that inspired me in a different way. And that comes again from listening to the guitar player.
Sick. Cool,
Yeah,
cool.
crazy.
Yeah. As far as me, I remember when we did the record Más Fuerte Que Nunca. For me, it was one of those times where like the bass and the guitar really synced up. We threw a bunch of different riffs around, and I remember even you wrote your own riffs, and we kind of complemented a lot of each other. I wish I was still in that environment. Right now, it's not. It's a little bit harder with the way things are now, but I remember throughout that whole arranging and writing process of that record, I really bounced a lot of ideas off of you, and we kind of went back and forth, and it really changed the way that I played. And it just, man, it just sucks that right now that a lot of the stuff that we're doing, I'm like having to be arranging a song here by myself. So it's kind of like I have to kind of think of all the different parts, but it does make sense to re-record after you hear the other guy kind of do a spin on it, because it throws you around to all these different areas, and it inspires other things that start coming out. So for sure.
I love that. That's good stuff. All right, let me get a question in here from somebody. All right, Christopher Aaron Smith is an acoustic player. I listen to the drums if I'm chording. At least I hope there's a question. If not, it's just feedback, which is great. We'll take that. If I'm picking, when I play electric, I primarily listen to the keyboard and other electric other electric guitarists to fill in where they aren't playing, or to create a tone that is separate but doesn't clash. Props, dude. That's right. So, not that we want to fill every hole, like, because guitar players are great. Hey, there's an empty spot. Let me turn the delay up and turn my volume and hit some gain. That's like, here's my moment. I'm ready.
Man, I've had to lay back so much, Doug, on when it comes to my producing, that like there'll be times where like I have one of my keyboard buddies go, you know what? You have to record first because I've noticed that I sometimes, since I'm a producer and a guitar player, I start producing so much with my guitar that after I'm done, I'm like, okay, so there's supposed to be a keyboard in here somewhere where we're gonna, I take up so much space. So I'm strategically now going, you know what? Let me send it to this guy first. Let me get his take. Let me have, especially if it's a song, one of these like DJ worship songs. We got all kinds of programming and synths, and I want to make sure that I leave space for that. And after that, I get his interpretation of what goes great there. I could like put my producer hat on and be like, okay, let's take this part out. The guitar could fit great here. I kind of like, I don't completely just take over the song because I've noticed that I can do that very easily as well. So it's been kind of a growing process for me as a producer and as a guitar player to kind of try to like also change with the times. You got all these new styles coming up, and you want to be able to kind of adapt. Because you don't want to be some guy that just sounds outdated, which can happen really fast.
Are you talking about me? Are you talking about me?
Oh man, no, I'm talking about me, bro. I'm like, man, I gotta be conscious about that because, man, in this day and age where you have all kinds of crazy,
dude,
programmers, man, these guys go out there and put all these kind of crazy vocal chops and synths, and so you have to know how to adapt. And as a guitar player, I'm old school, so I need to be conscious of all this stuff and try to fit my sound and try to kind of adapt my sound to what's happening right now. So it's kind of fun actually, but you got to pay a lot of attention to that stuff.
Well, you just made the great next point that we stumbled into, and I definitely, for anybody out there that's like, how do I just make a living doing this thing? I want to come back to some specific career advice, but generally, if you can't deliver the goods musically and people don't want to be around you, all the best career and the advice in the world ain't going to help. Although I guess that's good career advice potentially. So you spoke to something that is really, really important is that my wife was playing some Michael W. Smith, like some really, really old Michael W. Smith, staying true to the course that God put you on and just kind of going, okay, like I had a playing experience recently, which I won't go into any details, but it was playing around this environment and where, all right, that's just totally freaky what just happened. Joe's kind of going like, you can do it. All right, I'm going to go there because what's really weird is my other computer just kind of like sputtered, shot up a photo of Joe Satriani. So he's looking at me smiling, just kind of like, he's like, what are you waiting for? I'm like, all right, fine. So Joe Satriani's got this new backing tracks CD that it's actually a thumb drive that he's putting out with 3 albums worth of material. He invited a bunch of players to play over the top of it. And like some of these players are just terrifying, and like I don't have a problem with 16th notes. I don't have a problem with 32nd notes as long as the rate is not too astronomical. But some of these guys and gals, because Neely Brosh is on there, and it's really hard not to just kind of go, it doesn't matter whether you're a producer, whether you're a bass player, whether you're a guitar player, whether you're a keyboardist, not to go, oh, holy snap, and get distracted by like, oh, they do that. How do you guys find what it is the essence of why you got hired in the first place, hone that, and not lose that in the midst of expanding what you do?
Wow, that's a good question. Mike, you want to go first? I need to think about that one.
Sure. I think that, like I was saying earlier, in this interview, I just kind of found out my role. I found out that, when people called me to do bass, it wasn't in a solo fashion. It wasn't instrumentalist. It was hold down the groove, lock in with the drummer, and play my part. So I would do that. And as far as how it turned into a gig, how it turned into a career, I just did it so much and consecutively enough to that when people were calling in the beginning, they weren't paying. It wasn't a job, it was opportunity. So I would do that. And then one time someone said, "Hey, you did a great job today, man. Here you go," and they gave me a payment, and I'm like, "Oh my goodness! Like, I'm actually getting paid. Wow, this is awesome." And then the second time came up, and then they gave me something else, and then it just not overnight. It took a long time of really, you know, sowing, if you really want to think of it that way. That's the way I think of it. And then it turned into like I didn't have to tell people, hey, I charge. You want to play? I charge this much. People would reach out and go, hey, Mike, I heard what you did here. I saw what you did there. How much would it be for you to do this? And I would give a rate, and it just turned into something. But the cool thing about like, you know, the advice is, um, I asked someone, hey, how come this bass doesn't have more frets, right? Because I was like, it kind of cuts off early, or the, you know, the cutaways. Um, Sometimes you can get real up high, and I said, how come your bass doesn't have more frets? And the luthier told me, you want to know why? He goes, there's no money up here. And I
Wow.
go, wow, okay. He goes, you want to know where the money is? He's like, right here, all day, every day. And I've actually, those were very profound words, because um, I will hold down a groove, hold down the bass line, and every blue moon I get asked to do a solo, and that's great, and I enjoy it. But I've just understood my role. So, man, as far as advice goes, understand what your, if you will allow me the term, what your lane is. There are bass players that are extraordinary bass players that can play the groove, but they're really known for their soloing. I myself found my lane, and it's the groove, and God has been great enough to just keep sending work my way to do that. And I just did a solo the other day for a track that we did. You're not gonna believe me. It was an 8-bar solo, and I think I spent 3 hours, four at home by myself, working something out, because I'm so meticulous when I'm going to do a solo that there are people that would just grab a bass and just start playing. That's not, unfortunately, me. I wish I was that guy. But if you just put a drum beat down, I can groove with you like that. So again, it's our lane. So that has been great advice for me, and I've just continued to walk in that direction.
For me, a lot of what I do, a lot of the opportunities that I've gotten or one thing that I hear a lot is I have a pretty unique sound. My upbringing, I never had a guitar teacher. It was something I kind of learned guitar on my own. So I've kind of developed this very unorthodox way of playing. and but it's also forced me to kind of look at the melodic side of things, to instead of like thinking about scales or licks, I start thinking of melodies. So it's like it goes back to producing. When I produce a song, I think about melodies, I think about hooks. So when I'm playing my guitar, I'm thinking a lot about melodies. I'm thinking about the song, like, okay, what's gonna make this song better? So I try to create like vibes, and I try to create like an atmospheric stuff that like people can feel. Like, man, can I start playing something? I'm like, okay, is this really like is this really making me feel great right now, or am I just kind of wasting people's time? So
Mm.
one thing that really helped me out back in the day was I got into this whole Spanish world. As a little kid, I remember going to Spanish church, and out here in Texas, in Corpus Christi, like there's just so many Latinos, but they all speak English. I think I'm a fourth generation Hispanic in the States. My dad, Vietnam vet, raised me all USA all the way. So I was always like, why do we have to learn how to speak Spanish? I'm all about, I speak English. Why am I having to, why is my church in Spanish? And so I kind of I was raised with the like, I'm in the whole English world. But when I remember this one trip I took to Chicago, when I helped at this one church, this Spanish church, and I was able to really help them a lot, train them, do some stuff. And ever since then, God put in my heart, like, hey man, those Latinos, those are your people. You need to go out there and you need to help them out. So in the studio, I started producing for some Spanish artists, and I think a lot of them started calling me back because I had this like American kind of sound. I was raised on rock and roll, Third Eye Blind, Splendor, all these like American rock bands that I fell in love with the melodies. I mean, you hear the melodies off of Third Eye Blind stuff, it's ridiculous. The guitar melodies, the vocal melodies, it's just like Hook City, you know? So I'm like, I started incorporating all that stuff in the way that I would produce Spanish music. So in this whole Spanish world of like, you know, that was they weren't. It was the first time a lot of them were getting to hear some of the stuff that I was putting out there. So right away, I started getting clientele because one singer would tell his buddy, and they would hear this guy's record, and you know, all this stuff started happening. And then I ran into Mike and started touring with Gualo, which was the band that Mike was in, the artist that he was traveling with. So a lot of stuff started to kind of snowball, you know. So I believe for me, the biggest tool that I had was being in the studio working, producing for artists, and then I had a chance to actually, you know, tour with them, you know. So all that stuff started helping out. But if you're out there and if you want to make a difference, if you want to get work, if you want to get opportunities, one thing that I always say is go to the studio. You know, if you have a way of recording yourself, that's the best way to fine tune your sound because you know exactly what works. Because it's one thing to hear your guitar coming out through an amplifier. It's a whole other thing to mic it up or to record it or whatever, and then have it and then play and then hear it back. Like how do I actually sound once I've been recorded? Tweak your sound up. Start working with songs. Start understanding the way that things work. Not just improvising, but create parts, create melodies. You know, create vibes. You know, create atmospheric vibes. How am I going to do that? You know, so I would sit around playing and be like, okay, this is kind of cool. I combine this sound with that. Reverbs, what kind of chords am I going to play? So you start developing the sound that you like. I heard this a while back, and it was like, if you are a fan of what you're putting out, if you love what you're putting out, then other people will love it too. So just find out exactly what makes you work and what you believe in, and put that out. And I guarantee that people are going to be loving that.
I love that. That opens. Sergio has had a number of great comments here, so I'm having to kind of pick and choose here. I've got a little bit of an echo, and I don't know where it's coming from, and it's weird.
You sound great over here.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not coming out over here, the echo.
Okay, that's good. All right, so it's just totally weirding me out. And it started somewhere. Hang on. I'm just going to take a little preventative medicine there. Nope, didn't do a darn thing. All right, there's no reason I should be getting it. All right, so Sergio said, no lie, hearing a multi-track with Chris's amazing guitar is one of the most complicated things to learn in a matter of days. I've just done my thing because I'm short on time to learn. You know, inside that is a bunch of stuff that I'd like to unpack. You know, because as a worship bass player, you know, at some point you probably had to play, you know, the line from Salvation is Here. You know, so if you couldn't play 16th notes, which you can, you know, it would have been like, I've either got to get a pick real fast or I've got to find something to play. And because everybody knows the song, so they'll be like, they're waiting. You know, and the other part is that, again, Salvation is Here is kind of my favorite example, although I've never used it for bass. Same thing with that melody line. There's certain parts that you want to hear. And then there's certain stuff that if you played it, it would never make sense with your team. So it's just very interesting. You know, I've just done my thing. And it was just a great kind of comment to tag team on top of what you were saying. Is like, look, you got to find your thing, you know, and that's going to ultimately be what's going to resonate. But again, you know, copying Chris's stuff is a great way to go. So that's really cool. What? Well, I mean, hang on just one sec. Testing. I've got an echo coming back. Hey, does anybody have a speaker up at all? All right.
I don't have a speaker.
All right. I've got some strange thing happening. It's coming back in a feed off the interview. What we do as professionals is we just move on. Okay. So with that said, side hustle, you know, it's an interesting thing. It's no longer a side hustle type of world. It's just kind of like it's all happening at the same time. I was on the phone with a guy last week, and he told me a number that about made me kind of do a backflip when he told me how much money. And it's not about the money. So, like, let me just be clear here as I enter into this. Provision and money are two different things. So let me substitute. If I say the word money, just imagine I'm meaning the word provision, because the provision comes from here. The gifting that supports the provision comes from there. So it's all heading up and down in that vertical there. But he was like, this product, this guy made $100,000 for about a week's worth of his work, and I was like, because it's one of the areas that I'm getting ready to step into to help provide for my family in this in the changing times in the midst of all the things that are happening. But and I've never done this for the money, but I was kind of like, that's rather a lot of money. Like, I could buy like a couple more P bases. And the chairwoman of the board would say yes. So, I'm kind of curious, to whatever level you're comfortable doing this, talking about some of the things that you do that were not traditional revenue streams 5 years ago that you're eyeing as revenue streams now, kind of going, you know what? This is an important part. It's part of how I support my community. It's part of how I support my family. And it's also part of how the business is changing. I'd love to hear you guys' take on that.
I think Mike's muted. I can't hear you, Mike.
Is that where we go into baby come back? Baby come back.
If you want to, I can talk about my what I do when it comes to that. The good thing is we're living in a day and age where you can get creative and do a bunch of stuff. This year I kind of wanted to change my goal as far as what do I want. I think the past few years it's been a whole lot of just grind, touring, and just be out there producing and maxing that out. And this year I kind of felt like it was my time to to pour into other musicians. I started the year off. I did a few clinics in Ecuador. I did Costa Rica, and I did New York. Just going out there, spending time with musicians, because I feel like I'm kind of already at that point where it's like, okay, I've kind of done the whole touring thing. I play guitar and this, and I want to give back, whatever I can do with other musicians. And I felt like that kind of was in me, like this year, okay, let's focus on kind of like expanding what I do. It wasn't really like a business thing at the time. It was just kind of like, okay, let's shift this around and let's give this a shot. And I felt like it was great, and then we had the pandemic happen that kind of threw everything off. But before the pandemic happened, I kind of had it in me for a few years now to kind of do some sort of online platform where I can teach. Naturally I'm not a good teacher, but I feel like it's something I have to do. I'm like, I need to spend time with other musicians, inspiring them and teaching them. So in February, I called my buddy Andres, who plays for a band called Generación 12 in Colombia. And I flew him out here for about a week in February to record a whole bunch of content. We recorded like 75 videos. And then he went back and we edited everything. And when the pandemic happened, I was like, you know what? Let's just launch this thing. So we did. We put it together. It's called CR Online, and it's basically an online platform where we do, we spend time with Zoom once a week with all these students. We did a 5-day challenge, and we were able to get over 400 students. So now I have 400 students that I pour into on a weekly basis. I record content every week for that, tutorials, whatever it may be. I kind of hear them out and see where the holes are at. If we need to go over any specific topics, I kind of got it all. I kind of have a basic layout of everything already, but that's what I do. And I spend time with these guys every week, and I feel like I have another family. My wife is in it all the way, and she feels like we have this family with CR Online. And it's been a huge blessing in disguise, because in March, I got a call. I got the Blue Gretsch, the day after I was going to start my tour for this year, and we had 72 concerts canceled. So I was like, oh my gosh. I remember being at night, my kids were sleeping, my wife was asleep, and I was just staring at them. And I was like, God, what am I going to do? 72 concerts, a whole year's salary just gone like that. And it was cool that I had already done all the groundwork for the CR Online thing. So I just like launched it, so that's a big thing that I'm doing now that I think is great. It's not your typical like, 9-to-5 job. It's like we're things where we can get creative and we can put out these things and That's a big part of what I'm doing now. I also have an online school store where I do a whole bunch of presets of a bunch of pedals, and I actually have an overdrive pedal that I put out, a custom overdrive pedal that I sell as well. All kinds of stuff, man. I got T-shirts, I got all kinds of stuff, on that store that really helps me out a lot. That's a whole other revenue stream right there. Of course, the producing is something that I do a lot now. Now I'm also a part of a video crew that I do music videos for my clients. So I get my client in here, we record vocals, we produce it all up, and next day I have a whole video crew ready to go. We do music videos for them. So I've kind of like put my hands in so many different parts of this industry that throughout this time I've kind of learned the way it works, and kind of maximize my opportunity to, hey, you know what, if we're going to be doing this, might as well make a career out of it and get creative with it. So that's kind of my whole thing right now. I'm not sure if Mike's still gone or
Mike is coming back. Hang on a second. Let's bring him back to the party. There we go. Do you have audio?
I do. I had to do a hard reboot. So sorry about that. I don't know what was going on.
Well, you're still handsome and you sound great. So
well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Man, I think that like what Chris has done really has been revolutionary. I still remember the days when like Chris didn't post much on Instagram or Facebook, and then I would be like, he would like, dude, like, what should I do? And I'd be like, man, you should maybe like try this or maybe try that. And I tell him all the time, like, man, I created a monster, bro. You're like taking over the world. And I love it. I love it. It's amazing. Your original question was, what have I done more so now that maybe 5 years ago I wasn't doing? I've always liked being connected and involved and trying to make myself accessible to people. I think that I've always said that what we do when we go out and play in front of, thousands of people in the big stadiums and the concerts, and that's great. And I love it. I enjoy it. But I know that God always like sets up a conversation or two at each event. And like, I really value those moments where I can kind of like pour into someone or just like give some words of encouragement. So that connection for me is real important. So what I've noticed is that everyone wants to be the YouTube star. Everyone wants to be, making the monetization off of the content that we put out. But it's hard. You have to really build up your following, and you have to be real consistent with uploading stuff. It's a lot of work. So what I noticed, and it's funny, you guys might laugh, you might not, I don't know, but my wife always tells me, when I'll be upstairs and I'll be doing like a Facebook Live or an Instagram Live, and I'll come down and she goes, "Oh, are you done?" And you're done. You're not recording anymore. You're not doing a video. And I go, "No, I'm done." And she goes, "Okay, good. So you're not gonna do any more vanity sessions, right?" And I'm like, "Vanity sessions?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And she's like, "Yeah, because it's all about me and look at how I play the bass and blah 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 blah." And she's joking, obviously, but and I said, "Well, I don't hear you complain when those vanity sessions always give me repeat work." I said, "I get online and I'll show people how I'm recording in the studio, or they hear me record a song." I've just figured out that when I connect and the people connect and there is that interaction, I've gotten a ton of work simply from doing a Facebook Live. I don't monetize Facebook Live. I don't make money off of any of that. But what it's doing, it's basically a self-exposure. And then people write, "Hey, man, it sounded great. How much do you charge to do this? Hey, the drums that you guys recorded today sounded amazing. How much do you charge to do that?" So I'm like real conscious of that. When I do stuff online and live, it's always with a purpose. And I always think back and I make myself laugh because
say that one more time. Whether you're a church, whether you're an artist, whether you're a content creator, say what you just said one more time.
All of it, or just that main line. Everything that I do has to have a purpose. Yep.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yep. And that's the truth, because we can jump on and do so many things, and at the end of the day, like nothing comes back from it. So I've learned that when I connect, and I connect with not only online or the internet, but I connect with people, I make myself accessible, I respond to messages. I've had people reach out to me and go, man, I thought you only recorded for famous people. I didn't know that. I'm barely starting. I don't have any previous CDs. Like, would you record bass, on my stuff? And I go, well, I said I would. I said I would love to hear it, because even for me, I want to be accessible. But at the same time, again, not talking about talking about the standards. There is a standard. I might not record on every single track that someone sends me, but I will listen to it and I go, if I can put my name on that and I feel comfortable and confident about putting my name on that, then let's do it. And I think that has been awesome because people are almost shocked because they see me and Chris, on these big stages with, big artists, and they must assume, like, it's not like I could, text Joe Satriani and have him, record on my next worship, song, because he probably wouldn't even see my message, so people are shocked when they get a response. You think?
Yeah, Doug actually knows him, right, Doug? I think that's one of the reasons why we're still friends, buddy.
Oh, that is the funniest thing that anybody has said to me ever. I mean, the great thing about being musicians is the hang, because we do things to entertain each other, and I think this is one of the things that's unfortunate about a green room experience at a lot of churches, and I think it's one of the great things about Latin culture, where, like, how do I say this without offending anybody and without regretting it later? I think every culture has its different sense of community.
Oh yeah.
And one of the things about, I remember, and oh, it drove me nuts. I remember walking into this big, very great church, great thing, but like it was a very kind of Anglo kind of church, and walking into the green room and everybody is in their phone. Like literally, and I was just like I was can I say I was no, I'm not going to say that. I was frustrated on a physical level. And I was just kind of like, and they're all great people, but it's just like, you got to be doing life together to actually walk out onto that platform. And that's actually one of the things I love about the Miel San Marcos. What is it? Church from Home? Is that what it's called? Yeah, it's just like they're actually living that. They're teaching it to the family. The generations are coming up from inside. Like, you're watching them literally raise up the spirit of worship in the next generation and bringing that out to the world. Like, that's a very powerful thing. That doesn't happen in a vacuum on your own, sending your Pro Tools session off, via Dropbox, or, you send it or whatever the heck, or we send it. It just doesn't happen like that. It's actually the interesting aside to that is what you said was so funny is that we've learned new ways to hang out. Like, Chris, in a traditional sense, we've hung out a lot more than we would normally geographically. If we lived in the same city, it would be all over. Like, I'd be over there playing your Gretches all day long. You're like, hey, do you think Joe's going to call today? And I'm like, he doesn't call, dude. Or I'd be like, oh, man, hey, Joe, I got to call you later, man. I'm over at Chris's. Bye. I was like, and secretly it's Melissa, the chairwoman of the board. But, the hanging out, having fun, I think, we get a little caught up in the service thing, which there's, we want to bring honor to the service and all that. Don't get me wrong. But we forget that God really wants the service to be something that brings not just the congregation together, but the people that are serving together. I think we sometimes miss that.
Yeah.
So what do you
think
guys?
That's something that I loved about being with these guys, and even with Chris. Me and Chris were roommates. Like, so everywhere that we would travel together, we always ended up bunking together. And the stories and the things that would happen on the road. And we literally lived like brothers, all of us. And that's what I loved about in every different band that we might have played in, there was always this like brotherhood. So we loved each other like brothers, but I'm sure that sometimes we annoyed each other like brothers do as well, and we needed a little break and we would take maybe the couple of weeks off. And when we were back on the road, it was back to normal, like that's not a crazy thing to think of. But man, I am blown away that I know of a couple of cases where on stage the music is phenomenal, and when they walk off stage, like seeing a picture of each other, on the phone, like just annoys the heck out of them. Like there's not this connection, but they're just so good musically that it just works. And I'm always thankful that that was never the case. I'm thankful that we've got that connection musically, but I'm also grateful that when we walk off stage, like, man, we love each other like family. And I think that makes a big difference when you have to travel together, like what Chris does. Being gone an entire year, half a year with people that you don't get along with, that's a tough place to be. Yeah.
Definitely.
All right, so I'm not gonna go there all the way, but for all the people that you've seen get tossed out of a band, whether it's mid tour, whether it's at the end of the tour where they were very clearly not like there was no communication. It was just like not asked back. What are the common reasons that you've seen people do that led to the not asked back? That kind of
Chris?
Gentlemen.
Well, yeah, one of the things that I always talk about is for some reason, and it's just funny, especially when it comes to like new musicians that are getting to the point where they start getting talented, and to them it's all comparing, like, oh man, this guy's better than that guy, and they kind of think, okay, well, to be in this band you have to be really, really good, and it's all about talent to them. But really, at the end of the day, when you think about a tour, let's say you have one concert. Me and Mike do a lot of fly concerts, so let's say you have one concert in Guatemala, right? It's a 3-day thing. You have 1 day of traveling, you have 1 day sound checking, and you actually do the concert, and then you travel all the way back. So it's 3 days. You spend 3 days with this band. And really, let's say the concert's only an hour and a half long. So you're really just playing for an hour and a half. And the rest of the time, you're actually like this far away from each other, You're super close. You're talking. A lot of times you'll be up at 4 or 5 in the morning. The most inconvenient times you're traveling. So your personality and how cool you are as a person is more important than you think. Your attitude, all that is extremely important because the way it is on the road, stuff always goes wrong. Cables, you have the sound check can be going crazy, and you're frustrated, and your attitude and your character is extremely important. So I would say, yeah, it's great to be talented, it's great to have all that, but really your character is way more important when it comes to that.
I agree. I once heard someone say that talent will open the door and character keeps them open. A lot of people get the opportunity because they're talented, but they lose the opportunity because their character has not been molded in a way that is a team player. And usually that's one of the things that I've seen when they're not a team player. That's kind of when we start to see the shift. And I just have always, if I can make Chris's life easier, if there's something that I know that when we get there, he's going to need help in, someone would say, well, that's not my job. That's Chris's thing. He needs to work. I mean, we need to be team players. So on the road, in the big concerts in Madison Square Garden, at my home church, every single place that I go to, I try my best to have that team player mentality. And most of the time it's been for that simple reason why I've seen some people get, let go.
Exactly.
There you have it. I love the fact that your shirt says swing, right?
Yeah.
But it's a treble clef. I love that.
Yep. It's a buddy of ours.
That's so funny.
Chris, this is Joshy Swing's.
Yeah. I have that shirt too.
Yeah. I thought I would give him some promo on.
That's
on
awesome.
the interview tonight. Yeah.
Josh Swing.
That's awesome.
I'm telling you, it's all about teamwork. So I could have worn my own shirt, but I wore my buddy's shirt. That's what it's about.
There you go.
That's right. Hey, Chris. No, I love it. That's just such wise counsel. And it's just like the character thing, And I can certainly say in my own life, I've seen is like, God only lets you go so far. When your character's not ready, he just turns that tap off. And he's just like, you can just go sit down. I got somebody else has got more character than you. It's like, it ain't about the talent there, bud.
Yeah.
Go sit down. When you're ready, I'll let you know. And that ain't a place anybody wants to be, because unfortunately, sometimes when your character is not mature enough, you actually think it's everybody else but you. And you know that teachability. I'll actually use the word teachability. Like,
Yeah.
I would say, if there's one trait that makes people want to have you around, and one trait that makes people never want to have you around, it would be teachability and unteachability. If you find, and I'm speaking to somebody here, so I'm going to say this with love, because somebody right now, because I can feel it, this is a word you need to hear.
Yeah.
You're hearing it from other people. Sometimes and I find this in my own life, so let me just fess up and say, I'll put myself at the beginning of the line. When everybody else is saying the same thing, you're like, nah, nah, nah. And everybody's going, yeah, yeah, yeah. That's usually a sign of unteachability has prevented you from seeing what everybody else can see.
Yeah.
And it's usually in those moments we can go, okay, break it down for me here. So you think that I play I do 20-minute guitar solos at church. I don't see what the problem is here. I want to do the longest sound check that starts at the beginning and ends at the end. I don't see what the problem is. I want to bring 3 Marshall stacks and a couple of boogies in the back. I don't see what the problem is. Look, I know the other guitar players use the Helix, but I want to use tube amps because I have to get my tone.
Yeah.
You know, no. I have to use my cymbals and my snare. I'm terrible because I beat up on the poor drummers that, like, you know, I was like, I gotta have my snare, and this is all right. So actually, I got to stop myself before I go into full rant mode. But I would love to get you guys' input on this. Snare drum, number one culprit for destroying a worship mix, because it's right smack in the middle of the vocal diction. So, like, how many times are you guys in a church experience? You go like, "There's the snare drum again." Do you guys notice that, or is it just me just kind of tripping on a snare drum?
Oh, dude, the snare drum is super important, man. It's super.
Yeah.
But I mean, when it's too loud, destroying the vocals because it's right smack in the center channel.
Yeah.
Versus actually kind of like, you know, again, hang on. Let me break my mini dissertation on snare drum down. Just first of all, for any drummers in there, we know we love you. We could not do this without you. Cannot do it without you. We need you, and we love you, and we give you a little bit of a hard time from time to time. But you're not telling us it's like, oh, you got to have 20 pedals to get your tone. Like, you guys give it too. So, like, let's not beat around the bush here. The challenge is that a great a great kick drum sound. Honestly, all right. Let me start here. Let's build up the positives. A track needs 3 great things, in my opinion: a great kick drum sound, a great snare drum sound, and a great bass sound. Like, if it ain't got that, it's kind of like, it's like the 3 legs that'll let a table stand, right? Because you've got to just find the kick, you've got to find the snare, and that harmonic juxtaposition that the bass does between marrying all that stuff is together. Now, that said, when the snare drum, that leg gets too tall, you lose the balance on that table, and it means that everything else that's built on that table no longer has that platform to build on. So, right. I'd love to get your guys' take on whether you think I'm just like out of my mind about it, or, you know, kind of what your take is on how the snare drum fits and where.
No, I think you have a great point. Okay, so I can narrow it down a little bit. Are you speaking more like in a studio mix or in a live sound mix?
In a live sound mix, and my rant that I kind of go to from week to week is that, you know, if I were a front of house mixer at a small church, and I wanted to have a great mix, I would try and get the church to buy a snare drum and a set of cymbals, so I could at least have some sort of consistent thing in a setup teardown situation, such that, like, at least I knew what my kit was going to be. I'd probably have a digital board, so I've got a scene already set up, like everything's there. The bass player, I'm already got a guy that's on 5-string. Then the next week I got a guy that's on 4-string. Then I got Stanley Clark that's got to be up at the top of the neck every chance they get. Like, you know, and so you got all this other stuff, but a consistent kick and snare sound on Sunday is actually a big part, again, for Chris, for that same thing you talked about. And again, let me give a point of reference. that table is a really great analogy that I kind of stumbled into. What Chris is talking about is the same conversation I had with a great bass player friend of mine. Was when I would go up to the top of the neck, they kind of like to go up to the top of the neck with me. And finally, one day I had to kind of turn around and just go, not while I'm up there. What are you thinking? Because all of a sudden the whole bottom of the band is like,
It's the worst, man. That's
oh,
the worst.
dude. So the point being is it all fits together. It's all pieces of the thing. So in a live setting, in particular, that snare finding that right place to sit, such it's not killing the vocals.
And I think that even maybe taking that one step further, the volume obviously is a big deal breaker, but I don't know if it's just because I think here we do a lot of, I do bass obviously as a bass player, but I do a lot of drum recording, and I've really started to kind of hone in on whether or not the snare tone fits the song or fits the genre. Everyone is crazy about the low Black Beauty, thuddy, big fat snare drum. But the style of music that
not me.
Yeah. Well, I like it in context, but it does not work for everything. And I think that that's more of a pet peeve for me. Like volume is obviously important, but it's either too ringy or it's no ring. It's just a smack, or it's just a thud, or it's just any other description that I could put there. I've kind of learned that you're saying that it's a make or break type of thing, because it is right up the middle, and sometimes it's right underneath the vocal, even in a live setting. So it's either going to make the song or break the song. So you're not crazy, Doug. I think I understand your frustration, definitely. Yeah.
And you're right, where it depends on like this type of snare sound really goes with a very specific type genre of music, and it's good to know what fits with what.
Yeah.
Very important.
Yeah.
Talking about the Saint Anger snare. That's hilarious. So Chris, one of the things that you mentioned was Third Eye Blind. So I take it we're talking about the Semi Charmed Life album, which is one of my favorite record. Now, ironically, if you listen to that record, there's I think 3 drummers on it. The snares and the drum kit is different all over the entire record. But it at the same but musically it's one of my favorite records of all time. So Chris, is that the Third Eye Blind record that kind of made you just kind of like, I can't believe that? And that's of course Orion Salazar on bass as well.
Yeah, wow, that bass player is so awesome, man.
Yeah.
I think of him a lot when it comes to my bass parts and stuff too. But I'm such a huge Third Eye Blind fan that I listened to all 3 of their records. They were all unique. Yeah, the first one obviously had all the hits in it and stuff like that, but like there was great moments in all the records. I remember at the time I was like, man, I would jog like 5 miles a day. I remember that's all I listened to was Third Eye Blind. There was a band called Splendor. Obviously, I would listen to the Goo Goo Dolls a lot too, but Third Eye Blind was my biggest influence, and just the way he would blend in these super cool melodies, man, and the way he would do different things with his voice, and how it all kind of worked together. You had this bass player doing some really cool, just so much cool stuff. There's so much great stuff within their music that people have no idea how like genius they were. People have no idea.
I'll deconstruct a little bit of that because the guy that produced that record is a guy by the name of Eric Valentine, and he's gone on to produce Slash and just a ton of ginormous records. So all the stuff Slash was Miles Kennedy, and he did Ugly Kid Joe way back in the day. If anybody remembers Ugly Kid Joe, and a ton of bazillion selling records. But Eric is a brilliant producer. So you had a combination of Stephen Jenkins, who is your classic pop lunatic lead vocalist, giant attitude, but a brilliant songwriter, also a drummer, but also Kevin Cadigan was a guitar player on that record. And ironically, he was actually another student of Joe Satriani's. Now, Orion because Third Eye Blind was a Bay Area band. So Ryan was in this band called Fungo Mungo. So they were this funk metal band because there was this whole funk metal scene. So back, sorry, you got me going here, but here we go. There was this funk metal scene that basically the Chili Peppers were at the funk end of it, but there were all these bands touring California at that time that they kind of had this funk metal thing. It was long before the Seven String and Korn. So this would have been in the 90s, but people were absolutely. Joel Cruz just here. The amount of mics he uses for his guitar amps is crazy. Yeah, Eric Valentine is basically the genius. I've got a video I'm going to be doing for actually you guys. Have you heard of the Dynamount, the mic mover that there's an app for? It's just like absolutely nuts. So kind of crazy. And I've identified, by the way, where I've got some sort of feedback loop. So Chris, I'm going to be muting you and unmuting you so we don't get the echo. So it's no fault of yours. Something's happening here. So so I'm just going to be on your fader. So I'm going to be like the church mixing guy. You got to have faith, man. I got you. So the interesting thing is that, what's so I'm going to ask you guys a question because I think this is fertile ground for where we are, where you guys live and what you do for a living, and kind of how we got to Third Eye Blind. So in many ways, Third Eye Blind was the outgrowth of the of that whole thing. So that was No Doubt. That was the Chili Peppers. You guys ever heard of Fishbone? Mm-hmm. Yeah, you've heard of Norbert. Yeah, that's right. So like Fishbone and the drummer in Fishbone. So I went down to Los Angeles. I've lived in LA a couple of times, and I showed up at a jam at this place called the Coconut Teaser, and I'd forgotten I forget the name of the drummer, but he was the house drummer, and I remember kind of you know how it is when you hear a drummer and you're like, oh, that guy. There's guys that got something on it, and then their guys got a whole bunch of something on it. But the point being is that out of all of that scene, these bands grew up, and Third Eye Blind in many ways was kind of, because of Ryan's being in Fungo Mungo coming up out of that, you had some bands that grew up out of a California club scene where, you had the LA bands that would come up to the Bay Area and vice versa. So, one of the things that some folks might say about the Christian record business is that it's a little cookie cutter, if you were to go there. So how do you guys kind of navigate your feelings about that? Oh, there we go. Chris Alexander. I saw Fishbone and Primus. That was a wild show. Right. How can I leave out Primus?
Yeah, Les Claypool. Come on.
Oh, come on. So I was there when Les bought the Carl Thompson piccolo bass, and there's probably two people in the room that know what a Carl Thompson piccolo bass is. Wow. So Mike, I'm calling your name. Dude, bass geeks unite. So there was a place called Leo's Music, and Carl Thompson, the piccolo bass, was of course made famous by Stanley Clarke, and it was this great sounding bass. So there's a place called Leo's Music. Les was there, and he was like, "This thing's kind of cool. I think I'll buy it." So that's just California. So getting back to how do you deal navigating between being in the lanes, but also wanting to expand the highway? How do you guys deal with that? And as musicians, knowing that there's genre-specific stuff, but as creatives, want to be able to push the boundaries.
Chris, jump in there.
All right, I'll jump in on this. So you have to know your industry because especially if you want a future for your music. So I'm going to talk about this one example of this guy that I know, amazingly talented, right? This guy with an acoustic guitar can just take you to places. I mean, he had his own little like vibey style, kind of indie a little bit, but he was very creative. He wrote amazing songs. His voice was amazing. He had a lot of potential. I remember going up to Nashville with him, and we auditioned for this record label that fell in love with him. He had all kinds of opportunities, but one thing that the record label noticed that he was a little bit out there, like just his whole vibe was kind of wacky, right? Because he would like do like weird random like rolls. He would start rolling the ground, and he get kind of crazy. So he was in the Spanish world, and the thing is that the label was saying, "Man, we love your whole vibe. We just need to find a way to market you within this industry." And he basically said, "Look, I'm not going to compromise anything about what I do. I am what I am. What I do is art, and that's what it is, you know." So obviously, he didn't get the big record contract. He was on a Spanish record label for a while too, but they had to let him go just because he would go and he started freaking everybody out, you know. And the thing is that the Christian industry is pretty. I mean, they're pretty open minded. The Spanish industry is not open-minded whatsoever. So you can just imagine these older Latina, you know, these moms and stuff out there in these concerts watching this guy kind of get a little wacky on stage, you know, and it was just, it didn't really, it would just go over their heads. He put out this like very experimental kind of sound that was awesome, but it just was not for the industry. So, and he basically refused to kind of meet in the middle. And me as a producer, I think it's very important to know your industry, know the parameters you have, and obviously you can expand them and you can kind of, you know, push the rules here and there. But if you get too crazy, you're basically just going to cut yourself off. You might have different perspectives on that. You might have other producers that are like, no, you know, reinvent the wheel and all this and that. But I mean, I'm in this industry to make a living, so you kind of do have to know what to push, what not to push, you know, and how artistic to get with it. In other words, you know, so it is an industry that does have guidelines and it has parameters, so it's good to know it. That way, when I'm producing a song, I know how I can push it here or there, you know. So yeah, that's one example that I use a lot because man, this guy had so much potential, you know, and I think now he basically doesn't want anything to do with music, and it's pretty sad because he had so much potential.
I remember being at a concert together, Chris, and he like played facing the guitar. I mean, facing the wall for like a solid 4 minutes.
So you know what I'm talking about right away. You know?
Yeah,
Okay.
right away.
No.
I'm like,
Santana can get away with that. All right. Carlos does that, right? You're gonna see Carlos. Hold on. Let's just give a frame of reference, right? Like if you go see Carlos Santana, or if you've seen Miles, I'm sorry, you guys are getting me all excited here. I can't help it. But like if you're gonna see Carlos, you're gonna spend 4 minutes watching his butt. And if you don't believe me, the next time you see Carlos Santana playing a concert, watch. It's gonna happen. And with Miles, if you saw his face half the time, because he was wandering around, taking. I'm sorry. Go ahead, but just say it.
I will never forget that. I was like, does he know the people are over there? Like, what's going on here? But you're right.
Together, right? I remember that down in South Houston, we did a concert together. And you were with Koala. Was I with Koala at that time?
I think you were like about to start. I mean, it was maybe right before because you were there with that person. I was about to say the name. You were there with that person. But yeah, I will never forget that. And you're right, super amazingly talented. It was just a little too eccentric, you know. And I think that's a very fine line to walk because I know even now I'll hear something that just comes out on the radio, and I'm like, what is that? Like, it's weird, but it's crazy how, you know, you have to balance that fine line of what Chris says. I want to make a living out of this, so you know, you don't want to fully go out there and then not work, but at the same time, you've got these like trendsetter types of people that not only do what they want to do, but they can almost foresee where the industry is going, and they take these chances and they end up creating, you know, something new. So it's a very fine line to walk. It's a very scary line to walk because no one wants to put out a full record and it totally tanks, you know, as creative or artistic as it could be. So it's definitely a scary thing.
You know, it's funny. Prince is the guy that came to mind as you were talking about that. You know, there was a period of time, and I think I talked about this on my mainstream show. It's like Prince opened for the Stones and got mercilessly booed off the stage. This would have been about 79, maybe 80. So there was no Purple Rain yet. He was just a gentleman of color wandering around in kind of some thong like underwear, opening for the Stones, and and it was just a thing. And of course, the irony is a decade later, that same group of folks, music lovers. That's a good way to. I'll pivot. We're like, this is the greatest thing ever. I saw him open for the Stones.
While they booed him off. Right?
Well, I was like, of course, I didn't boo him off. So do you guys remember Dez, who played with Prince? Dez, like how revolution do you guys go? How about Mika Weaver?
Man, the thing about me is that I was raised in a little cocoon, bro. So I didn't really see. I don't know a whole lot about secular artists, I guess you can say. Back when I was a little kid, I was just the only band I knew that was like any kind of edgy was like Striper, right? That was when I was raised a little bit on Striper. I was able to get away with that, but that was about it.
To hell with the devil.
Exactly.
That's awesome. There we go. Come on, Alan for the win here. We got some fans here. We got this going on. Like the guys, Sergio, Coconut Teaser, Fishbone was wild as Primus. I mean, like old school Fishbone and Primus. Man, I mean, it's just like, so it's an interesting thing, right? Because you kind of bring up an interesting point. To a certain extent, we are a little sheltered inside that thing. Do you think? And I actually, and somebody else said it. So after I'd said it, I didn't feel as bad because somebody else said it. And I kind of called it the Christian bubble. So there are good parts of it. And so let's talk about the good stuff. What do you think are, we can actually speak to, first of all, I'll throw in a couple of things, and because I got a road story. I was on tour opening for Gilby Clarke, who replaced Izzy Stradlin, Guns N' Roses. We were doing a van tour across England and then fly dates across Europe. And the drummer is a lovely guy, but he knows I'm a Christian, and he's basically got this porno magazine that he's stretching it to its widest possible thing, like trying to lead it towards me. And I'm sitting next to him in the van. I'm just like, here I am. You sent me. I'm cool, but it's just like, it's just one of those things. So there are a lot of benefits to actually being inside that bubble, right? Where God really actually wants to build that hedge of protection around our lives. Because honestly, in a mainstream, hang on, let me bring my mug in here for a second, or if I can, where am I? There we go. In a mainstream music, career, it's all about you, right? I mean, that's actually not a very good place for a musician to live. Like, you guys talked about it earlier. You kind of lose the plot, and all of a sudden it becomes about, I was pretty good tonight. Yeah, I nailed my parts. That tone, my tone, I got that thing dialed. And they are downloading my presets like nobody's business, man. I'm gonna make that new car out there. That was my Helix presets right there, baby. And I'm going out to West Coast Customs, getting some new rims. So sorry, I'll reel myself back in. God builds a hedge of protection around us for our own good. So that bubble, in some ways, is really, the funny thing is there was a great Bible verse that I was was talking about basically being, the people talk about Christians like, you guys are just sheep. And I'm like, you know what? It's good to be sheep. Mm. I want to celebrate a sheep. So I'd love for you guys to, to kind of, and we're getting close to the end here. I'd love to hear what words of wisdom you guys have and revelation you have about kind of being inside this thing that kind of is our hedge of protection and what that looks like for you guys.
Well, for me, I think it's very important. And I've been lucky to be traveling with great artists that have their head on straight, like Gualo with Mike. We were traveling with Gualo Zamorano. He was great. He's a great example when it comes to a dad, a husband. And now that I travel with Miel San Marcos, those three brothers, they're just great people. So, even within the Christian industry, you have a bunch of different characters that can get a little shady, and I think that in this day and age that we live in, social media being the way that it is, it's hard to cover a lot of stuff up. So all these shady characters that have been in our industry, the mic industry me and Mike are in, have come to light. A lot of them have, because
Mm.
people don't like fake, you know. People don't
Yeah.
like somebody that's out there preaching something and living something totally different. So a lot of that stuff has come to light. And a lot of the artists that you see out there now that are doing great things are great people. So I've been lucky to be traveling with these three brothers that are just great people. That, you know, obviously you run into them at like 4 in the morning when they haven't slept at all. We got to travel 10 hours that day, and all of a sudden they're just great people. You know, I mean, it's weird how awesome they are as people. So, you know, for me, it's been great, because sometimes when you get out on the road, you kind of get in your own little world, and it can be very unhealthy. It can be very, very unhealthy if you're not doing the right things. It can really affect you in a bad way. So I've actually been lucky to be in that Christian bubble that has been great to me. I come home and I don't feel like I'm like, you know, like, yeah, I'm home and it's great. I can be with my family, but I felt like I've been influenced by great people. You know, Mike, what do you think?
Definitely. I think that in the early years, you know, when I started traveling with Koalo a little bit before you were there with us, Chris, like he was very much like a father figure to us. And maybe even in the sense of like a stern father, you know. So we're young, we're 21, 22 years old. And, you know, we're on the road and we're not used to the maybe the attention that we're getting or the exposure that we're getting. So he would always really just kind of guide us and direct us and instill in us like covering each other. So he's like, you know, he would always tell us like, you know, don't ever go places, you know, on your own. Like always, you know, go together. And not so much a safety thing, more of like a looking out for your brother type of thing. You know, don't you see one of the other guys go and potentially could get himself in trouble. You know, look out for each other. It was basically what he would always instill in us. And I think it was awesome because it was in those formative years that we really needed that direction, that bubble, if you will. And now that we get, you know, different calls, I'm really grateful because I think that I learned a lot, even though I was, if you would call it that, in a bubble. The bubble helped me understand, because even though it's a bubble doesn't mean that I don't see what's on the outside. If it's a clear bubble, I can see what's going on, but I see that I'm protected and, you know, on the inside. So even when I would be exposed or outside of this bubble now, um, I really feel like those formative years really helped me kind of keep my head on straight. And it's crazy because even last year when I started traveling with Marcos Witt again, we had a conversation, and he said, you know what, Mike, like I really was praying about who, you know, should have this spot as director, you know, and I just really felt like the Lord was saying, you know, this is for you. And he goes, I'm going to be honest. He said, you know, more than just the director, more than just the bass player, what I need, and I feel that the Lord is telling me that this is why he's brought you. He's like, I need a pastor. I need someone that will help watch over the group of people that are with me, the team. And I mean, I I took that as a major compliment, like that someone else could see me in that sense, to like be that person that I just described, that we described as Koalo, the way that he would teach us and care for us and guide us, that someone like Marcos would tell me, I see that in you. And that's really what I know, not only just the musical, but the spiritual aspect of it. I know that you can be a blessing and bring, be a good influence with the people in the team. I was like blown away, you know, but I do bring that back. So that bubble is, it's a great thing. But if we live in that bubble and we're just ready to bust out of the bubble, then we're not going to be doing the right things, you know? So I think it's perspective.
Wow. That was that. I want to make an analogy. I interviewed a worship artist, and he made the analogy that he and his buddy, if they went and bought some fruit trees, and his buddy's tree fruited in the first year, but like by the time it got close to harvest, all the branches broke off the tree because they couldn't support the fruit.
Mm.
It was heavy. I was like, wow. And he was just like, and what's neat about that story is it's about spiritual inheritance.
Yeah.
It's about discipleship, right? That's kind of the thing that generally doesn't happen outside of the world we live in.
Right.
Let's use the word interchangeably, world or sphere. That could include the sphere of influence where God wants us to have our influence. Not that he doesn't necessarily want us to have influence out of that sphere as well. God will make that way for that to happen, and he'll create the bridge. But I just love the fact that somebody was a father to you and saw that in you. Because here's the thing: it's like, generally speaking, you don't water the weeds. You water the little sapling that you're going to go, that's going to be a tall tree someday.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he saw that in you. And I'm sure, I don't know if everybody here knows who Marcus Witt is, but like, he's a heavy cat. And what I love about Marcus is like, he led worship at the NAMM show, and like, he comes out, it's not like he's holding a Bible. He's got that thing like it's a guitar neck, and he's like John Mayer playing a blues solo. He's got a hold of that thing. I'm like, oh, I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it, because like, he was like, this is where it comes from. It was just like so heavy. So like to like that speaks a lot, man. God bless, man. That's pretty darn awesome. Chris, what you got for us?
Yeah, no, that's important. I think, well, I mean, first off, talking about Marcus Witt, man, that guy, talk about a pioneer right there. I mean, I don't know if there's a Latin Christian person out there that's never heard of him. I mean, he's definitely changed and pushed boundaries in our world that make a lot of things possible today. So and when you talk about like watering seeds and when you see potential, I have a few guys in my life that I see that as well. And I think at this point where me and Mike are at, we're kind of at that point where we see other guys that were like us when we were younger. We're like, you know what, that guy's got potential. I want to pour into him. As in to me, I really need to put some quality time into that have some serious potential. And I think it's up to us now to kind of be those people in their lives, to really just steer them the right way, mentor them. One thing that made a big difference to me, Doug, and I'm not just saying this because you're on the feed, but I talk about you a lot when I do my Zooms and my clinics. You've actually poured a lot into me when it comes to this whole world of like working with, knowing how to work with companies and companies like Gretsch, and I mean we have Mia Audio on the feed here. That's a pretty awesome company. These headphones that I have here, this company, all these things that you see in this room behind me, that companies have sponsored me. These relationships, knowing how to, and the thing is that you mentioned this to me is like those aren't things that are taught. You have to kind of learn them the hard way. So I know we've had a lot of extended conversations where you kind of direct me. I know a while back I had a little situation. I had to figure out some things. I came to you. I had to make a business decision. You gave me great advice. But even you being there for me, kind of mentoring me in this whole world of like, working with because those are the things that nobody's ever going to know. Even like you said, even the talented guys, even the famous guys out there, musicians, they don't even know how to work with all these relationships and how to do all that stuff the right way. So even you, for me, Doug, you've helped me out a lot, and I've kind of taken that on myself, and what I've learned, I'm kind of pouring that into other musicians as well.
That's the heart of what discipleship, and not that I'm discipling you, because I will say, there's a guy named Ian Fisher that really early on when I got saved, he was the spiritual, he provided spiritual care to the early Hillsong team. And so he was a guy that I knew from my wife. My wife grew up Hillsong. and used to sing with Darls. Was one of her background vocalists. Used to sing in the choir. Um, and this is extra special. Darlene and some of the background vocalists, they sang background vocals for Barry Manilow.
Wow.
Now, how many? That was it's true, but it's kind of funny. But the point being, like, Barry, can you imagine Barry Manilow was like, and I think I'll have Darlene check. So but Darlene, I think, used to do a lot of studio work. So that's kind of how that happened. But the point being is that he was somebody that very decisively poured into me. And, so somebody that, when you look at the long game and, you begin to kind of go, first of all, who's around, who's got the right heart, and, the thing is that, Chris, you got a long road ahead of you. And, the thing is that there are two types of musicians you generally find. The ones that invite you in and the ones that do that. And it's really clear because there ain't. And then there's the people that are just a little aloof. That's a different thing. But generally, they're either inviting you in or they're keeping you out. And it's just like as believers, especially when I watch somebody. And Mike, as we get to know each other, we're going to have a lot of fun. This is going to be great. But Chris, as I just watch the way you carry yourself, and I watch the way you have handled yourself as the business side of your artistry is flippin' staggering.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like, and Mike shaking his head. He knows what I'm talking about. He's like went from like, I never knew you when you're like, yeah, should I be posting? What should I be posting? Be like the Spanish and the English, and just owning social media in a servant way, right? Because what we do is it's always we're serving people, and that's the difference between this.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's an open hand, we're serving people, as opposed to this, which is holding people back, right?
Yeah.
And the great opportunity was to just, first of all, the fun part is actually when you get a chance to take somebody around and get a chance to show them introduce them to some folks, and just see how much it blesses them. Like, I got to tell you, it's not about ego. You're just kind of like, I got a chance to do something that was so incredibly cool. This guy's exceedingly talented. And he now, Mike Taft, so, is the artist relations guy at Ibanez. Sorry, at Gretsch. He was my guy at Ibanez. I've known Mike for 25 years. So these are relationships that I can bring you into a relationship that is a guarded but close relationship and with trust, because I know you're going to walk that out in honor. And so to watch like all those guitars show up, I'm just like, look, and those Gretsch videos. Like, I was on your channel yesterday, I'm looking like, oh, there's not just one Gretsch video, there's two. And I'm like, look at that, and you're just kind of going, look at God move through this. And it just kind of like, it means that every relationship, and here's the other thing I'll say, for anybody that's out there that's a little bit younger, is if you're giving away what you've got, you're living in a place of abundance. And that is an abundant atmosphere is an atmosphere that you're letting God just kind of continue to open door after door after door after door after door. And people who do this are just trying to hold on to that little bit that they think is theirs, because they're so, and people have fear. I get that. This is not a time that people aren't confronting their fear. But when you try and hold on to, there's an analogy. And Mike, it was kind of like you're up at the top of the neck, that you ain't gonna make any money off of those notes. A raccoon, and I think this was like an Old Yeller or somewhere, I don't know, but like a raccoon trap, they would put something inside a trap, and the raccoon would try and get the food, and would put its hand in there, grab a hold of it, and not be able to get out of the trap because it would not let go of the thing that enticed it into the trap and was trapped and stuck there. As opposed to like, hey, let me take Mike over to this, because he's gonna do just, Chris over to this. Maybe I'm just speaking prophetically now, but
I receive it.
I receive it. And just be able to go, hey, you know what? Because think about like I come from a background in the mainstream. That's pretty much how I know all these people. So for me to be able to bring my Christian brothers, haven't had any female artists that I've done this with, but to be able to take my Christian brothers and people that have earned my trust first and foremost, and be able to come on, let me, and there's a great story here, and then we'll get close to ending on this, but I want to make sure that I don't miss something you guys have got. So years ago, that's a great story. I love telling stories. That's the best thing about being older is you got lots of stories. So years ago, I was in my late teens, and that was kind of when I started to get fast on the instrument. So I'm at this thing, and I'm warming up. There was a guitar death showdown, and I'm upstairs at this little venue called the Mabuhay Gardens, which was kind of some nights it was punk and some nights it was heavy metal. And this night, a Blind Illusion, my buddy Brian's band, was playing. Anvil Chorus, where they had the guitar death showdown, kind of two rigs. One guitar player at the end of the night would replace each of the guitar players, and you do this guitar death showdown. And so there was this band called Exodus. Now, the guitar player named Kirk, who used to play in Exodus, he now plays in a little band called Metallica. I don't know if you've heard of them, but like, wow. So I'm back up there warming through this thing that Joe had shown me. And kind of Kirk looks over at me, and he's like, where did you learn to do that? And I was like, oh, I got this guy, Joe Satriani. He teaches in Berkeley. Here's his number. So years later, I'm at the NAMM show. And it's some night that Mesa Boogie had co-sponsored. And Kirk's behind this kind of this little, you know how they kind of like at airports, they have the little thing that hangs down that you kind of disconnect the thing. It's kind of like a giant, padded rope type of deal. And he looks out and he sees me and he just like, he pulls that thing. I was like, what are you doing out there? Come on in here. Like, wow. and so that spirit, I'm like, you know what? And, that was Kirk, really. But I was kind of like, that moved me so much. It was like, it wasn't like, hey, you get to hang out with the important people. It was like, come on in, bro. Yeah. Like that, come on in, bro. I was like, that to me is one of the biggest gifts you can give to somebody, to that spirit of inclusion, just kind of going, you know what? It's not about holding you back. It's about lifting you up. Like, the best opportunities in life are about lifting somebody else up, right? Because the honor goes to God, and it goes to what God does in those moments. And like, that's the silver lining. That's where I love it, man. All right.
Crazy story, Doug. So you introduced Kurt to Joe Satriani.
Yeah.
Wow. Because, he's a student of Joe, right?
Yeah.
No?
Yeah. No, I mean, that's, so it's a Bay Area thing. It was, I grew up in a really special place, in a special time.
Crazy, man.
That is crazy.
Nuts.
All right.
I will add to that, Doug, that some of the nicest people that I've met throughout these years and throughout my career, and even before my career had started, are some of the most what's the word that I'm looking for? Like, basically, it's not that they're so confident, but they're not worried that someone else is going to come in and steal what they've got, whether they're a believer or not. They're just confident in what they're doing, and they have that inclusive spirit. Has really just blown me away, because it's typically the ones who are doing this that are the most insecure, the always, have something to prove. And I just love, like, even just hearing that story, like the impact that we could have by doing something as simple as going, what are you doing out there, man? Get in here. Like that marked you, like you'll remember that, forever. And there, I think these opportunities will come up for us to do the same thing for other people. And I mean, for me personally, and I'm sure that I can speak for Chris, that I think that inclusive spirit comes because we know why we are where we are, and we know who has put us there. So it doesn't matter who comes in and who is included into the circle. If it's God's time and if it's God's purpose for us to stay or for us to move on, it's going to continue. I always say this, people are like, man, you must charge a lot of money to do what you do. Well, I charge what I charge. Sure. I bet you don't ever do stuff for free anymore, right? Like, oh, that's the thing of the past. And I said, you would be surprised. I said, I still continue to do, and I won't use the word pro bono, but there are things that I have been asked to do, and they are just straight up and said, man, I'm embarrassed to ask you this, but I really need something from you, whether it's a bass track or this or that, whatever, but I don't have anything, would you help me out? And I always go into it with this mentality. I truly feel that I am reaping now I'm 37. I'm reaping now things that I had sown in my very early years. So if I want to continue and I want to be 50, 60, 70-year-old, still doing what I love to do, maybe not as good as I did before, but still, I mean, I've been impressed and blown away with people 70, 80. I remember seeing a guy in Memphis playing a guitar. He was probably 95, and the guy it was slow, but there was so much feeling in what he was playing. It wasn't about the speed, it was about the feeling. But I always say this: if I want to be later down the road continuing to reap, then I have to still right now continue to sow into other people. So that just whole inclusive thing, the bringing people in and not shunning people away. Again, I think it's all about the honor that God brings back to our lives, and I'm a living testimony to that, man. Like, so I love that you shared that. That really just inspires me to keep moving forward with that heart. Like, that's so cool. Very cool.
Yeah, very cool. How
Yeah.
awesome. And the good thing is, like, what would be cool is, like, if, people say that about us, like, I try to go out of my way too, at concerts and stuff like that to kind of, we might be done with the set, and it's one thing that I learned a lot from Mike and his wife. Mike's wife is a singer. She's got like 9 records under her belt. She's amazing. I remember playing at these massive conventions. It would be like 10,000 people show up at these conventions, and Lolly was there every year singing. I remember when I started mixing, and I would measure my mixes up, and you always want to pull out those like pro mixes and stuff. So my mix, the mix that I would pull up was one of Lolly's records that she did. And to my perspective, it was like the coolest thing ever. And one thing that she always would do in her concerts, she would always stick around at the end, spend time with people, make sure that every last person there, got to know her and went out of her way. And I see that with you too, Mike. And it's one thing that I've kind of had to, like, and I always need to tell myself that, because sometimes you'll be exhausted. Sometimes you'll play a 3-hour concert and but you're putting yourself up and you see all these people that just want to connect and just want to talk and just want to be heard for a second, so I try to make sure to go out of my way to be that person, and I believe that stuff like that comes back at you. That stuff is, you're just sowing into people's lives, so no matter how cool you think you are, you're never too cool to do that.
That's right.
My wife, the first time I toured across the United States, the first time I half toured across the United States, because the tour ended in a Denny's parking lot in Colorado, and then basically the tour got started again the next year. But those little moments, you don't always remember the exact interaction. But one of the great things about social media is those folks end up on your feed one day, and that little moment, and here's the thing, let me be really clear when I say little moment. That was a quick moment in passing in the midst of a tour where you're not sleeping much. We had a show in Vegas, and you guys know the math. We had a show in Vegas and a show in Colorado on back-to-back nights.
Mm.
And I was one of the drivers.
Oof.
And we were in a van. Like, it's basically, it's a 22-hour trip between gigs. Like, it's just insane. It was about 20, so we barely made it. But the point being is that when you're tired, you've been traveling, it's not about selling merch. It's just like that little moment that you're sincerely there, present with people.
Yeah.
As opposed to like, oh, I'm here at the merch table. Let me sign something. Let me take your money. Thank you. Next person. And because merch is, for those of you that are out there that have yet to tour, merch is one of the ways that you can afford to tour. It's a legitimate great thing, but what merch is really great for is building genuine rapport with people that will remember that moment in their life. Because at the point somebody pulls out their wallet and wants to part with their dollars to buy a T-shirt with your mug on it, and they want to pick up your CD or your digipack, and they want to actually give up their email address to get on your email list,
Yeah.
like they're all in. Like
Yeah.
that is a moment that, you know, if for those of us that have toured and are not touring presently, you realize how valuable those moments are, because those people support you when you're on the road and when you're not on the road. And that little moment, they like, you know, because most people go to concerts because they love music and they love musicians, and without them we couldn't do what we do. So when you just take that little moment, you're just like, hey, what's up? It's so funny because we just, you know, I see these messages like, we met at the such and such in Dallas and so, and I can't say I always remember, but I can say I always remember how glad I am that we took the time with people, because we cared to take the time with people, because we knew it wasn't about us. And eventually people scratch and sniff, get down deep enough, they're like, oh, they're Christians. Like we were always, God always had a word for us, whether Melissa and I spoke about it. We knew we were representing, and we knew we had an obligation, such that when people actually kind of went back and just kind of went, oh, wow. Like they didn't give me the Jesus talk when they saw me drunk. They didn't, and the funny thing is, in those moments, sorry, I'm going a little long, but it's important. We were in Anaheim, and this one guy kind of came up. We never met him. He was like, my wife just left me. I'm trying to get custody of my daughter. Like, it was this whole moment where this person felt safe with us.
Yeah.
It was, and we were strangers in a sense, but it gives you that chance, like you said, for people to feel known, right?
Yeah.
That sense of feeling known is an incredibly powerful experience, both on the receiving end for them, but also on the giving end, because you're actually going, hey, you know what? It's not about what happens when I'm up there playing guitar.
Yep.
Is there any last thing you guys would like to add? You guys have brought it, and you have families to get to, and I want to be respectful of that. But you guys have been phenomenal, and this has been one of the best times I've had in a long time. So thank you for that, guys, and everybody's here.
Yeah, I'm just honored to be here, man. Every single time and if I'm like hanging around the house and I see you doing something, I jump on and just kind of love to soak up all the different stuff you do, because you do a lot of different stuff, Doug. You're the only guy I know that can get like some crazy YouTubers and a straight like preacher, and all these, and just some random company that does something that has nothing. It's like you get them all in one thing, and you get everybody working and getting along, and it's crazy. That's a whole skill in itself right there. But I love that you kind of branch out, and do stuff out of the box, and people out there. It's crazy that we live in a day and age where we can get all this cool information on all this stuff that you could never learn anywhere.
Never. And it's
super cool.
It's only going to get better. And Mike, for a bass player, you talk a lot, dude. Like they're usually back in the back with their beanie down, complaining the guitar's too loud. It's like, I don't have any light back here. Wait. I lost you. Hang on. Is that me?
Oh, you're back. You're out again, Mike.
No.
I think he's done.
We're gonna keep going. All right, no. That's right. That's showbiz for you guys get this going here. So Chris, tell me what your favorite thing about working with Mike is.
Man, me and Mike, we go way back, man. It's crazy. I'm trying to think of the first time that I ran into Mike, and I think it was I was producing this girl, right? You back, Mike?
I'm back. I'm back.
Back. Okay, we're talking about the first time we met each other. Can you take me there? What was that about?
I can take you there. So Chris was doing a record for a friend of mine that was a new friend of his. I get a phone call. It's easily midnight, right? Hey, bro, man, I heard you're gonna do bass on the record. Blah blah blah. It's so cool. He's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm home. It's midnight, bro. And he's like, bro, we're hanging out, man. We're at this taqueria Arandas, and we're just hanging out, and we're eating some food. And why don't you come hang out with us? And I'm like, bro, I live in Pasadena, and you live in the Woodlands. That's like an hour away. Oh man, come on. It's not even that bad. Like, just come hang out with us. Well, anyways, this guy convinced me. I drove an hour, Doug. An hour to meet a guy that I've never met before in my life. I knew who he was.
That's true.
I knew who he was.
I love that.
And I'm like, all right, let's do it. I mean, I was single, I was like, yeah, let's go. So we went, we hung out at, this restaurant. And then, I don't know, 2 or 3 in the morning, he's like, bro, come over to the house. Let me show you some stuff. I go to his house. He shows me like stuff he's working on. It was easily like 4 or 5 in the morning that we were done. And that was the first time that me and Chris ever hung out. But dude, it was like an instant connection, man. Like, me and this guy have been like brothers ever since. I'll tell you what, I don't think I would ever drive out an hour at midnight for anybody else but Chris Rocha. So that was the beginning of our friendship for sure.
That was true, man. I remember that. Yeah. Back in the day, Doug, we're just a bunch of musicians, man. I would fall asleep at 3, 4 in the morning every night. That was normal for me, I didn't have a family. I didn't have kids, when you're a musician, you just get lost in this world of just like, you wake up at noon, you just start working all day. I would produce all day and night, and it was just normal. And I remember that night. It was me, Mike, Isaiah. We had a few other bunch of musician buddies, and it was a fun hang, and we would hang out a lot around that time, right? We started hanging out a lot.
Yeah, a lot. It was very cool. I definitely can't do that now, Doug. Like, I think that's why I'm getting cut off. My wife is calling and it's interrupting.
Oh, that's
why I'm having to like get off and jump back on.
Oh, there's nothing worse. Like, the digital interruption is like, and you're trying to stay cool and collected, this. So,
I don't know if you caught me, but I'm actually writing on my Apple Watch. I'm like, live, still here.
Oh, that's so funny.
So we're good. Right. We're good though.
All right, my gentlemen.
He's been asleep for like an hour already.
That's so funny. All right. Well, on that note, I just want to say thank you to everybody that's been hanging out with us. This has just been great. We know there are. I sound like an airplane, flight attendant. We know there are other planes that you could be flying on, but you chose to fly with us, and we are so thankful that you did. And one of the greatest things that God has really put the revelation of in my heart is that I'm building, however big or small, communities. Yep. And what's neat about that is that when you have the revelation of what a community actually looks like, you begin to realize how important each person is inside that community. So thank you, everybody that came tonight. If you're watching on the replay, thank you. Alan, the same to you, my friend. Thank you for hanging out. Always a pleasure. Bruce Adolph, my publisher, in my servant spirit, I must remind everybody, and humbly so, that we have Sergio, igualmente, se habla español. And the thing is, we have this new issue that's coming out tomorrow, and igualmente también. Hand sanitizer and masks. That's all I'm going to say. And we've got this guy Mike in there. Hang on a second. Let me just double check something here. I wonder when does this go online? Give me just 1 second. Let me just check. Oh no, it's not up yet. Nope. It's going to come out tomorrow.
The issue's not up yet.
The issue's not up yet. But what we do have is if you go to musicosadoradores.com, awesome. It will take you directly to the first issue of Músicos Adoradores.
Nice.
And there's a great feature in Espanol on each of these guys. And oh, hang on a second. There we go. Uh, Nehemias Gracias, or I'm just going to believe that Nehemias Vicente habla español. Porque. So there we go. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Emerson, igualmente, thank you so much. He's speaking in English, so I guess I said thank you. Total Evo, thank you. And
Yes.
Mike and Chris, you guys are awesome. And I love. I want to speak. I want to speak over you guys just a little bit. It's very rare that you find brothers that you can do what you guys get to do with. And I know you guys have an appreciation. You don't just hang out until 5 a.m. the first time you hang out and just kind of go, the heck? You wake up the next day after 3 hours sleep going, what was I thinking? But there we go. Hang on a second. Yes, and English laugh out loud. Hang on a second. Good. Bien, gracias. Gracias. Igualmente. No, I missed it. Matthew,
Wow.
great to see you. Thanks so much. So in any case, oh boy, everybody's coming through. Awesome. Long live the Telecaster.
El Jefe.
El Jefe. See, no. Oh, that's right. No, see, Bruce es el jefe, pero en inglés no te gusta cuando llamarle jefe. Pero no entiende en español cuando llamarle jefe. Es la verdad. Te gusta, le gusta publisher, pero no jefe. Pero que entiendo que está, ¿cómo se dice? Estudiando hablar español. Entonces, muy pronto entiende que jefe es.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I had to. I also speak
Muy
Korean.
pronto.
Annyeong, Sergio. Thank you guys. This has been awesome. Francisco, bien, gracias. Thank you, Mateo. Much appreciated. Hopefully, I got everybody there. All right, awesome. Thanks so much. So I was just gonna say, it's so rare that you have somebody that you get a chance to walk in this path with. How long have you guys known each other?
How long has it been, Mike? I don't know, man. It
Man.
was
Well,
15?
like we did Más Fuerte que Nunca in end of 2011. So it was a little before that, maybe
like a
maybe
year.
a few
because
years.
Let's see, and that was the previous record.
Yeah. Yeah, you're
So
right. You're right.
20,
So maybe
2009?
yeah. Well, I mean, dude, we got married Lolly and I got married in 2008. You were in her wedding already.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
it was
So,
like
yeah,
way before.
probably. Yeah, dude. It's been a minute.
You know that Mike got married the day after my birthday? Is the day after my birthday, Mike?
Yes.
Right?
But you didn't find that out till years later.
Yeah. Yeah.
You should ask that. You should ask about that, Doug. It's a good story.
All right. So my whole life I've celebrated my birthday on April 19th, right? So when I'm like in high school and we're going through like old boxes at my house, and all of a sudden I find my birth certificate and it says April 18th. So I'm like, Mom, that's not even my birthday. We've been celebrating my birthday on the wrong day. My mom's just like nonchalant. She's like, I don't know. I didn't remember. When I took him to school, I thought it was the 19th. So basically, all the way up until my high school, I was in high school. My birthday was on April 19th. So Mike's wedding anniversary kind of is on my birthday a little bit.
Yeah. I love that story.
That
True
is
story.
well. That I have my own version. I keep forgetting how old I am. That's so funny. Thanks again, Francisco, Mateo, Sergio. Muy bien, gracias. You're very kind. Romeo, do I say? ¿Cómo se dice? Romeo or Romeo?
Romeo, I guess, right?
Yeah. Depends.
I-
Still, tomato.
Either way, gracias usted. And then I think he actually got this. That's publisher to you,
Uh-oh.
buddy. So I guess his Spanish classes are actually working. Chris, buy a Strat. Good vibes.
I
Much.
know. I need to get in my collection.
True friendship there. Get a Strat that's not a Fender, something like Sir. Get a Strat that's not a Fender, something like a Sir Michael Kelly, Ricardo's guitars with Roberto Prado or an Ibanez. You know, Chris, those, although Mike Taft might not like it too much if you showed up with one of those new fancy Ibanez, like you see Lottie playing, and you know, in any case, back to you guys. Normally at the end of the show, I pray kind of for the people that are watching, but tonight I want to close and pray for you guys because, you know, the word I'm getting is generations. You know, your guys' kids going to grow up. Mike, do you have kids?
We don't, but that is definitely on. That is one of life's goals. At a later date, we'll talk about some other things that God has done in our lives. Grateful to the end of the world, but that is one of the probably my biggest dreams is to continue on our legacy of generations for sure.
So that's awesome. So Lord, I just lift Mike and Chris up to you, Lord. The word you're giving me is generations, and it's not a word for me; it's a word for them. And you know, generations are about, like Mike said, you know, it's about purpose. It's a matter of seeing the unseen, stepping out in faith, stepping out into the unseen, just in faith, just letting you fill in the blanks where we just don't have the vision yet. But you know, Lord, your word says where there's no vision, the people will perish. So Lord, we know that you give us that vision. You give us enough of the vision to lead us in the right direction. And so, Lord, I just pray a hedge of protection around Mike and Chris, Lord. I pray a hedge of protection around their families, Lord. I pray that you guard their hearts. I pray that you guard their minds. I pray that you guard their businesses. I pray that you guard the people that come around them and the words that get spoken over them, Lord. I just pray that you get into the grooves of their lives in a way that whatever it is that the enemy might want to wage against them, Lord, it's just impenetrable. I get this vision of like petrified wood, that it's just so solid that the enemy just can't get in, Lord. And Lord, I pray that out of that DNA, out of that fabric, there's generations that they raise up both of their flesh and blood, and of the people that they have the opportunity to sow into their lives, Lord. I pray that the harvest is fruitful. I do not pray for fruiting trees that are unable to sustain the fruit. Lord, I pray that just like has been poured into them, they're able to pour into people that they see the ability to sustain. The generations that are going to carry this thing forward with love and honor and passion and grace and honor. Lord, I want to honor their honoring spirit, Lord. I pray that the people that have watched this, Lord, would be inspired by at every turn. There's a sense of honor to you. There's a sense of honor to the people that have given them the opportunities, and that honor being the operative word, Lord, that there is, where there's honor, it's about others. It's about you. It's not about us. So, yes. Lord, we just pray that, you know, first of all, we give thanks for this gift of music, Lord. How amazing that in the act of being able to worship you with our talents, you bring us together and we get a chance to have this it's not just fellowship, it's friendship, Lord. And I just love the way that you bring us together. So, Lord, I just pray that you just knit Chris and Mike together in a powerful way, supernaturally, and that they can be each other's strength, each other's shadow, if you will, watching out for one another, praying for one another, celebrating with their families each other's lives, Lord. That's a very special thing. And I pray, Lord, that you just continue to magnify that relationship in every dimension and just bless them coming in and bless them going out. In Jesus' mighty name, amen.
Amen.
All right, guys. Love you, bros. Te amo con mucho gusto. So awesome. What a pleasure. Thank you, Chris. Safe travels for this weekend. Why don't we just do a quick moment, and why don't you tell us where you're going to be?
Yeah, in Saturday, I'm going to be in Antioch. Is that how you say it? Antioch, California.
Yes.
In the Bay Area, I'm going to be out there with a company called Sam Audio that they do in-ear molds. I'm one of their artists, and we're going to be out there. Look at that, my boy Emerson's going to be there. Yeah, we're going to be out there doing some stuff. Me, Sergio Gonzalez, and Bonnie Munoz are going to be out there. I'm going to do a clinic and some performances with just me, myself, and with Bonnie. I'm going to play with him. It's going to be a fun time. And then Sunday, I'm going to be in LA doing a drive-in concert. So it's going to be pretty fun with Miel San Marcos. So we're going to be in LA. So it's going to be pretty fun.
Very cool.
And where's the driving? Do you know where the driving concert is? Is that on the Miel San Marcos website?
It's on the Miel San Marcos website. I'm not sure where it's at.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's got to be a pretty big drive-in.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm trying to
And
see where.
Mike, what do you got coming up so people know what to look out for?
For sure. I'm actually going to be in Georgia, in Atlanta, specifically with Instituto Canción. We're doing a clinic on the 21st, which is obviously a couple of weeks. So we're going to be out there. A buddy of mine, a drummer from actually Georgia as well, he's going to be out there. So we're just looking forward to that. I was just a few weeks ago at Sonic Ranch in El Paso, an amazing studio. I mean, it's like a studio of what dreams are made of. It's
pretty much
incredible. So it's been awesome to like, that feels kind of like a glimpse of hope to one day be back to doing what we love to do and doing it the way that we're used to doing it. You know,
That's great.
Everyone says the new normal, or I don't care what we call it. I just want to be out there again, doing what we love to do with the people that we love to do those things with. So I know that little by little, you know, it's going to start happening. I'm believing it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks again for everybody that hung out. Chris and Mike and Chris, you guys are rock stars, but in the best meaning of that phrase. Thanks for making the time and just for being you. God bless.
Thank you, guys.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.